Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and welcome back to my colleagues to another day in the legislature and another beautiful day in PEI. Hi to all those watching across Prince Edward Island and tuned in, of course, online or through Eastlink, Mr. Speaker. I want to begin going up to your neck of the woods, Mr. Speaker, and how wonderful it was to hear of a group of students in the leadership class at Surrey Regional High School for a couple of initiatives, Mr. Speaker. First of all, they have created grab-and-go kits for some essential products in the washrooms of the school up there to help those who might need it. I thought it was a wonderful initiative, hygiene products, Mr. Speaker, and some other essentials as well. And also, Mr. Speaker, that class is working to create a relay for life for the Eastern Kings region for later this month, Mr. Speaker. So to Julie Bruce, to Allie Clinton, to Ava Lesperance, and of course, and sorry, Minister, and also, Mr. Speaker, Karen Coyne-Smith is the teacher. And I remember back a long time ago, Montague High School, grade 12, I participated in the leadership class, Mr. Speaker, and it was one of the most valuable classes that I remember taking, and a lot of things I carry with me. So to those great students and faculty there, Mr. Speaker, thank you for that great work. I also wanted to give a shout out, Mr. Speaker, to Doug Newson and the staff at the Charlottetown Airport Authority, Mr. Speaker. It's been a tremendously difficult year for them. I know they had their annual meeting the other day, and normally when the Charlottetown Airport Authority gives their annual meeting report, Mr. Speaker, it's about growth, it's about success, but COVID has hit that organization like it's hit the rest of us very, very hard. And I just wanted to say thanks for all they've done. We've been working closely with them to be prepared for when we get through COVID, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to thank Doug and the staff at the Charlottetown Airport for doing a great job in very difficult times. I also wanted to welcome home, Mr. Speaker, 4-year-old Maverick Bishop. From an incredible journey that he's been on that's taken him to hospital in Charlottetown, on to Halifax and Toronto and back to Halifax. And he's had 6 open-heart surgeries, Mr. Speaker, and it is great to see that this brave fighter is back home here in this province. He's a huge fan of the Charlottetown Islanders, Mr. Speaker, and I can join Maverick in rooting so hard for that team, but he's also a tremendous fan of blue, of the Leafs, Mr. Speaker, and while that's a little bit difficult for me to rally behind coming on playoff time, I can think of Maverick and my late mother as the only 2 Leaf fans, Mr. Speaker, that I could cheer for. So I just wanted to say welcome home to Maverick, and you're brave, you're strong, and you're a wonderful fighter, and keep up the great work, and it's great to have you back home. And finally, Mr. Speaker, with today being Red Dress Day, we honor the lives of those lost, Mr. Speaker, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and also the calls of action that come from that report. It's important for all of us to be thinking all the time about what we can continually do to move the reconciliation process forward, Mr. Speaker, and it's also a reminder to all of us that we must do everything we can possibly do to stop gender-based violence. One of the very first questions that the Leader of the Opposition asked me in this legislature, Mr. Speaker, when I took this job, was if we would annually table a report, a status report, on the missing and murdered women, Indigenous women and girls, Mr. Speaker, and the progress that we're making as a province. And later today, Mr. Speaker, I will be glad to do that again for the 2nd year in a row. I think it was it's a meaningful question, Mr. Speaker, and I think we need to mark how we're doing by always looking back to see where we've come from and what progress we've made, Mr. Speaker. So I will table that report later today in the tabling a document session following question period. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks so much, Mr. Speaker. I want to start by thanking the Premier for all of your comments, of course, but particularly that last commitment to table this year's report on the MMIWG. And indeed, that was very early on, and I don't remember exactly what was said, but something along the lines that if we are to have proper, meaningful reconciliation, and then that's more than words. It requires action. And this report reports on the actions that this province has taken along the recommendations from the MMIWG report. So I thank the Premier for that. Speaker, this coming weekend, the Wrights Creek Environmental Committee is hosting a community tree planting event. I know there were some questions in the House yesterday about the state of the forests here, and I believe the Minister is to make a statement later on, which I look forward to. And this is just a small community group led by John Andrew, who's a wonderful resident of that area. And they've done extraordinary work with Wrights Creek and the pond there at St. Peter's Road, dredging it earlier this spring to bring it back to ecological health. And not only is this an environmental program, but there's a walk beside the pond and the river there that provides a history of the area. And it's a really beautiful project that they've got going. So thank you to that. And I hope many in the region, in that part of the city, will be able to join John and his volunteer group for that tree planting this weekend. The Premier mentioned the lovely story on CBC this morning about the leadership class at Surrey Regional High School and the projects that they're doing there, the grab-and-go toiletries and the Relay for Life. And in my own district, in the leadership team, so the sort of equivalent team in Bluefield High School, they've taken on a similar challenge. And I want to thank Sophie Flower, Marianne Axworthy, Bryn Wilson, and Diego Mendoza, who are part of a group who are spearheading a food and necessities drive, which is happening next weekend, with all of the donations going to the South Shore Food Share. So students being leaders in our community, it's a wonderful thing. So thanks to all the folks at the Surrey Regional High School, and also to those in Bluefield High School who are contributing to their community so meaningfully. Thank you, Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure again to rise today and welcome everybody back and say hello to all Islanders and especially people in my district of Evangeline Muscush. Mr. Speaker, it was great to see the Fishers have a successful and safe setting day, and looks like they're going to have a good place for the catch, which is awesome. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to make a reference to comments the Premier made as today being May 5th, National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. The symbol to honour this day is the scarlet red dress, which will hang in cities across the country to remember the lives of victims and raise awareness about the importance of this issue. The National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls has recommended hundreds of actions to be taken and is now up to governments, public service, industry and Canadians as a whole to make the important necessary changes to have that happen and be outlined. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Welcome everybody in District 19, Borden, Kincora. But over the last 3 or 4 days, Mr. Speaker, I'm really impressed with our municipalities across the island, and I want to give a shout out to them. Over the last 2 years, we've strived hard to increase our relationship with our municipalities and encourage people to take part in our municipal governments across this island. And I'm pleased to announce today that we have quite a list of new councillors that have been elected across Prince Edward Island and municipalities. And I want to give a shout out to them. Kay Hyrick in Resort Municipality, Larry Creed down Three Rivers, Christine Cran in Mount Stewart, Beverly Campbell in Mount Stewart along with Spencer Long, Barb Vesey in York, Diane McKenzie in York, Hendren Duran in York, Debbie McKenna in St. Peter's, Mary Mercia Carlson in Belfast, Keith Belbin in North Wiltshire, Nicole Deagle and Mimi McGash, and Diane Wagner up in Central Prince, accompanied by Karen Milligan in Northport, Melody Van Owen in Alexandra, and Lucy Carter in Alexandra, and also Benny McCrae in Kensington. But a special shout out to Harrison Duffy. He's a young man, he's 19 years of age, from the village of Kincora. Graduated high school, he's been a very active community leader across Kincora in different events, and he's been elected as a councillor in Kincora the night before last at age 19. And just a big shout out to Harrison, and it's great to see these young people get involved in politics across our island. Now also, Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage, we have some other by-elections coming up, and I want to encourage some people to get involved in them. We have a lot of candidates coming forth in Borden Carleton and Crapo and Brett Albin and Cornwall, and best of luck to all them candidates that are running. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, hello to everyone in District 10, Charlottetown, Winslow. Yesterday, when the members were getting up and saying, best of luck to all the fishermen and fisherwomen out across the province, and although District 10 does not have many wharves or many harbors, I do know that there are a lot of fishermen and women in District 10, so I hope they had a good first day of set, and of course, growing up the son of a fisherman, very special day for me. Also, Mr. Speaker, I do want to give a big congratulations. It is brand new to PEI, and it just started this week. Lacrosse PEI has brought in box lacrosse. So this year, Mr. Speaker, it's being played at the Cody Banks Arena in Sherwood, also in Bedeck, and of course they were my constituent of mine, Brad Bissett, was down with his son Riley painting the lines down at St. Peter's Bay for the lacrosse there. So I want to wish all the boys and girls and the young men and young women the best of luck this season as they play an amazing sport of lacrosse here in the province. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, a big week for another constituent household in District 10, Charlottetown, Winslow. A happy birthday today to going out to Lorna Hamlin, and her daughter, Sarah Jo, turned sweet 16 this week as well. So a big celebration week at the Hamlins. Happy birthday, girls. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, Public Safety, and Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to give a big shout out to all the farmers today. It's a beautiful day out there, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure there's a lot of seed going in the ground today, Mr. Speaker. But today I want to give a special shout out to my twin aunts, Donna and Lorna Thompson, Mr. Speaker. They turned 65 today. I love all my aunts, but those two aunts lived next door to me growing up, Mr. Speaker, so they're extra special to me. And Mr. Speaker, if you have ever heard them sing or at a special occasion, a wedding or something, they have voices of angels, Mr. Speaker. And I want to point out that Donna right now is going through a little extra battle, Mr. Speaker, and she's going to win this battle, Mr. Speaker. So happy birthday to my twins aunts. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So first off, welcome to all my colleagues and everyone watching from District 18, Rustico Emerald. I just wanted to recognize that it's Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Month, and today, because the virtual carnation pinning, they do that the first Wednesday of May every year. It's really, carnation is a symbol of hope for the multiple sclerosis community. And Mr. Speaker, I wanted to recognize my constituents, Betty Pound and Taylor Pound, who happen to be my next door neighbors, Mr. Speaker, and their late husband and father, Alan Pound, who passed away from cancer. Well, he used a wheelchair, and so they purchased a wheelchair van back in 2017. But when they were done with it, they donated it to another family, and it's been donated again for the third time, I believe. And it's really a great way to serve that need in the community. And so I wanted to congratulate them on their work. And I know that they did this just because they wanted to help people in Alan's honor. And apparently there is a fairly large need for this. And I just wanted to recognize them because they really did this to make a difference and help out. So hopefully they can keep that going forward. Finally, Mr. Speaker, as most know, I grew up on the North Shore of Lake Huron. And Mr. Speaker, my homeroom teacher in high school from grade 9 through grade 13 was Lois O'Hanley. And she actually, her family hails from New Frage, Prince Edward Island. And she sings in a group called Women in Song. And tomorrow on Main Street, she's going to be interviewed by Matt Rainey. So I thought that was a really neat connection, and there's some great music, and it's a great way to recognize and celebrate women as well. She's a fantastic lady, and I don't know, maybe by saying her name, some people might recognize the O'Hanleys here from the island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Valerie-Inverness, third-party whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too want to welcome those that are watching back home in the district of riding of Valerie-Inverness. I also want to acknowledge that today, May 5th, actually is the anniversary of my father's passing. And so it's 1 year away, but I noticed the Minister of Agriculture wore his father's tie, so today I decided to wear my dad's sport jacket. So it's a bit blue, but anyway, so I decided to wear that to the legislature. But I know if he was watching down, he'd be saying, keep those Tories to account, son, do your best. So I'll be at it. But also on a somber note, Mr. Speaker, I do want to also recognize the passing of Jean Doherty. Jean was a communications officer back when I was in the Department of Health. I think she was my communications officer for about 6 months. So I certainly want to pass on condolences to her family on her passing or untimely passing, Mr. Speaker. And also, while I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity last night to attend the Canadian Potato Museum's annual meeting. And for those that are attending museums' annual meetings upcoming, the numbers are not very pretty, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Canadian Potato Museum, I always have to acknowledge that it was one of the few museums that actually made money. And in 2019, it had about 13,000 visitors go through the museum and had a profit in 2019 of $40,200. Last year for 2019, Mr. Speaker, 500 people went through the museum and had an operational loss of $15,600, and that was with the help of a number of programs, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program and the Canada Emergency Business Loan Program, Mr. Speaker, as well as some of the COVID relief funding that was put in place. But I think, I commended Chair Alma McClellan and the board and Don O'Reilly, the manager, for what they had to go through as for adversity to try to keep the thing afloat. The reality is they have done some renovations there, and they are looking forward to a positive year, but already they're starting to try to plan for in case things don't get opened up, what will they do. So I know in the world of potato farming, I always said the one thing you didn't want is have 2 bad years back to back, and so I hope government is well aware that the potential risks that some of our museums are maybe unfolding, and let's hope that they don't have 2 bad years back to back, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning, Minister responsible for the status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and welcome back to all my colleagues today on this beautiful day. And hello to everyone watching in District 9, Charlottetown, Hillsborough Park. Mr. Speaker, I also want to acknowledge the members of the MMIWG Indigenous Working Group who are watching the live stream today. I want to thank them for all their efforts and engagement in this working group over the past year, and I look forward to hearing about their future work as it unfolds. Wala'alioe. As was noted, today is Red Dress Day, the National Day of Awareness of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls in Canada. In 2019, I had the opportunity to attend an event that included a powerful photograph by Mi'kmaq artist Patricia Bork that was commissioned by the PEI Advisory Council on the Status of Women. The photograph captured a strong and beautiful image that remembers missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls with a red dress. I was incredibly moved by Patricia's work and what it stands for. Indigenous women and girls deserve to live in a safe and healthy communities. Today I encourage all Islanders to learn more about the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. As this report has shown, every one of us has a role to play in order to combat violence against Indigenous women, girls, and 2SLGBTQIA people. I also want to share that today is World Maternal Mental Health Day, and I want to highlight a resource that was launched today by the Mental Health Commission of Canada that supports the mental wellness of women who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, specifically those who have been sidelined from the workforce as they shoulder most of the child care and household responsibilities. If anyone out there is struggling, please reach out. It's important to know that there are government and community services out there that can help you. You are not alone. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Pleasure to rise again today in the House on such a beautiful day. The drive-in today, lots of activity in the fields. I know I was talking to a farmer this morning very early and was already out putting some seed in the ground. I want to congratulate all the fishers for a safe day yesterday and look forward to getting a feed of lobster here soon. I mentioned the other day in the House, I was trying to count up my wharves quickly Mr. Speaker, and they're Pinette, Macaulay's, Wood Islands, Murray River, Matching Point, Murray Harbour, Seal Cove, Beach Point, and Clowes Wharf, and used to have Graham's Pond, or the creek, in my district as well. So lots of fishermen, and we wish them a very successful season. As the honourable member mentioned, it's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, recognition of the report that came out. It seems like a lifetime ago, but I had the privilege and honour of attending that presentation of the report back on, I looked at my phone, June 3rd, 2019, and had the honor of meeting Jody Wilson-Raybould at the time, and we had a great discussion, and it does seem like a lifetime ago. Many recommendations in that report. Also recognizing World Maternal Mental Health Day, as I'm going to be a grandma, and very excited about that. Not until August, but I wish Carolyn Mills, my son's partner, a wonderful day today, and she's healthy and doing wonderfully. Look very, very forward to this first grandchild for both sides, so he will not be spoiled at all. And this morning I stopped at the Country Taste Kitchen and Bakery. I had my coffee and a little treat. Got to talk to the owners there, and they're going to have a pop-up on Saturday with the truck and roll truck. And I've never experienced that, and I purposely didn't because I feel it's something I'm really going to love. And but I think on Saturday I might have to indulge, Mr. Speaker, and it's just great to see the activity in the community and across the island, and I just want to wish everyone a great day. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's not often I get up in the House to speak, but I thought I'd take the opportunity to mention a couple of things that are going on in my area. So first I want to give out a shout out to my mom who watches every single day. I feel like she's probably one of the loyal followers that tunes in every single day. And even on the day where I may just get one question, she's very quick to send me a text and say that I did a good job. So I assume that I did based on that, but I could also assume that my mother's probably not going to say I did a bad job. Not since high school, at least. The Premier laughs because he knew me in high school. Anyways, as many of you know, with babies at home, I'm up at all times of the night. So it was pretty exciting this morning when I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning to see boats sail around the point of Burnt Point out of the harbour in Georgetown, and the harbour in Montague and the harbour in Lower Montague. Some with their full deck lights on, so it's quite a sight to see them go by. And I'm not awfully close to the point, like it's probably a mile away, so it's pretty impressive to see them come. And some just with their navigational lights on. You can hear them coming for quite a distance at that time in the morning because it's so quiet in the area, and then you hear the rumbling and gurgle of a boat coming along. And then as I get ready this morning, I was able to watch them. I think they're moving their traps in, Mr. Speaker. I think they're moving them closer to me already, so I don't know what that means, but maybe there's a storm coming. Maybe they didn't find fish where they set their traps, but we're excited to see them back because for 2 months it's a great morning activity to watch people out fishing, and I always hope that they're doing well. And I know I have a number of friends that fish right in front of my house, and Mr. Speaker, you probably know Terry Condon. He played some hockey around. Terry fishes right in front of my house, so in the mornings I could pretty near hand him a coffee if I was ambitious enough, and it'll be good to see Terry back, and his traps will be pretty near on the beach by the time the season ends, and that's how close the lobster are to me. Mr. Speaker, I also want to give a shout out to Matt Clendenny. I met Matt by phone this morning. So Matt is the owner of Lucky Bean, both in Montague and in Stratford. And for those who read the Eastern Graphic, he has been quite active in the move to have the pride flag flown in his particular jurisdiction, which I also happen to live in, though at the extremity. And I sense from the article in the story today that Matt has been frustrated with the ability for the local council to get that moving. So I called him and had a great chat. What a wonderful individual. He told me he's involved with the Green Party. So he's involved with the Green Party. He says he's done some work in that area, so I'm not sure who for, but we had a great chat. Wonderful, kind-hearted gentleman. I told him that the Minister of Transportation had made an announcement last Friday in the House to paint the crosswalks, the pride crosswalks right across Prince Edward Island. He was excited to hear that. I said it's a normal activity for us to fly the flag, and I said if you have places that belong to government want us to fly the flag. I said, I'll talk to the Minister of Transportation and see if we can get it at the Services Center in Montague, the Fisheries Building in Montague, the Transportation Office in Georgetown, the Bridgetown Depot office, or wherever else we have buildings that we own that we can put them there ourselves. Because you know what, Mr. Speaker, it's 2021. It's not a discussion that I feel like should have to elevate to the level that it seems like it's elevating there to move forward. Matt was very happy to hear that government was on board. He was quite complimentary to the minister and the movement that he's making. So I just want to give a shout out to Matt Glendenning. And what I said to him on the phone was, it's great to see people stand up and use their voice, and then find out that many people, the majority, are with you on your voice. So it's courageous people like Matt who initiate change, and I'll be quite happy to see that change happen because of Matt's move in my area. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to take note, probably on a less than positive note, as I opened up the Island Farmer this morning and saw an article that was written about a motion that the National Farmers Union had made about me in particular at their meeting, and they took exception to my Simpsons reference from earlier in the session. Some of you may recall it, some of you may not. I thought it was funny. I meant for it to be funny. Some took it as such, and apparently the National Farmers Union has not. But you know what, Mr. Speaker, what I've always believed in and I've been taught, and I always tell other people, particularly young people, if you're getting criticized for how you say something and not what you said, then you're right. And the fact that the National Farmers Union could only find fault with how I said something and not what I said shows that I'm right. On the topic, on the topic of being right, and on the topic of criticizing somebody for how they say something versus what they've said, I want to read to you an excerpt. And every Saturday evening we've made it a little tradition in our house with the young babies that we listen to the hoedown. So we turn on the hoedown. The kids recognize now the first song because that's the staple of the opening. So we listen to it until it's time for them to go to bed, and sometimes we leave it on ourselves for a little while afterwards, and sometimes we just turn it on and I go to watch the Canadians win, which doesn't always happen either on Saturday night. But this one particular Saturday night, and it's really bothered me, Mr. Speaker, and it's really bothered me. The hoedown is a family show. Everybody I know who doesn't live here anymore, or who's moved to Calgary or British Columbia, they tune into the hoedown in the middle of the afternoon where they live. It's a family thing, and it's meant to be positive and instill positivity and positive feelings, and it has positive memories for me. When I hear singing in the kitchen, I can picture being in my grandparents' kitchen, sitting on the couch listening to that on Saturday night 40 years ago. Not giving my age away, but 40-some years ago. So this particular night, this ad comes on, and I'm going to read you a part of it, Mr. Speaker, and it says, in PEI, large transcontinental corporations and foreign investors are in control. Industrial agriculture is destroying the land and water, and government claims that PEI needs the economic gains which come from abuse of the land. And that belongs to a group that the National Farmers Union is a member of and who they also support. And I take exception not with how it's said, but what was said. And there's a bunch of things that are mixed in with that, notwithstanding the untruths that are in there. But there seems to be a bit of racism that doesn't sit well with me. And I assume that they're talking about the monks who live in the district that I live in. And I take great exception with the land issue and racism coming hand in hand. If you have an issue with how much somebody owns, I get that. That's fine. And there's a way to discuss that doesn't involve disparaging somebody's race or disparaging them because they're not from here, or in this case, foreign investors, as they're called. But we all know who they're talking about, and I think it was a gutless play, Mr. Speaker. And I will say how I have met with the monks. I met with the female monks. I met with them all. They are wonderful people. They are not here. They are not here to create negativity here in Prince Edward Island. They're here for positivity. When I talked to them most recently about our net zero plans, they were super excited, and they said, That's what we want to build. That's what we're trying to build. And I think in the not too distant future, you're going to see the goals of the government and the goals of the Buddhist community come into line here in Prince Edward Island. So I'd ask anybody who has tendencies to look at a group like that in that manner to hold their fire. You're wrong. And if you have issue with land holdings in Prince Edward Island, talk about land holdings, and let's put to bed once and for all this racist mentality that I don't subscribe to, and no Islander I talk to on a daily basis subscribes to. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cornwall and Meadowbanks, third-party House Leader.
I'm going to agree with your mother, Minister. She's going to text you, and you're right. So good for you. I'll be quick, but I know you're looking at me saying you're not going to take too long. Anyway, this morning I try to get out to the Bonshaw Hills with my dogs a couple times a week, and this morning I was out there, and I'm always amazed at the number of people that are there, and a lot of them, when you speak to them, their first time, but it's not going to be their last time. But I was in the horse arena this morning, and I have the chucker for the dogs, and when no one's around, I'll chuck the ball and they'll go get it, and one of them went into the pond and dropped the ball, and the ball sank, and the two of them stood there looking at me as if to say, go get the ball. So I was throwing rocks and I was getting sticks and I was trying to get the ball out, and I said, so I said, come on, we'll get it when the pond dries up. Nope. They're not moving. So they sat there and they just stared at me. And I'm telling you, they're about 80 pounds each. So it wasn't easy. But anyway, I just wanted to apologize to the people that were walking on the trail when I stripped off to go in to get the ball. So, but anyway, that's a short story for this morning. But I did run into two people, not completely, two people this morning out on the highway in Bonshaw. Larry Harris of Bonshaw was out this morning picking garbage up, and obviously they've been there for a while because there's bags lined along the highway. And Susie West, Danny West's wife, was Susie McLean, who I went to school with. She's been out now 3 or 4 days, and as you drive along the highway and see these bags, you certainly appreciate these people and how they appreciate their community. So a little shout out to them. And this morning, rushing as most of us do, stopped by Great Canadian Bagel, and in the drive-through this morning was Garrett Lewis, and we had a little chat, and Garrett's a young entrepreneur who's actually taken over Great Canadian Bagel, and a fine hockey player one day too. So congratulations to Garrett. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Miss anyone? I miss anyone? No? Member statement. The honourable leader of the third party? Yeah?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, over the past couple of weeks, members of the Liberal caucus have submitted a series of written questions. We are asking for more detail on government's poor decision to collaborate with the Atlantic Lottery Corporation to exploit islanders during a pandemic. And as I said last week, this decision is not just distasteful, it's wrong. In particular, we are looking for very specific information from the Department of Finance, especially with regards to bonuses paid to executive team members at Atlantic Lottery during this pandemic. And remember, Prince Edward Island has several members on this Atlantic Lottery Board who were appointed by this government, and that board has a role. Now, I understand that on occasion there are difficulties in responding to written questions, but in this case, I just mentioned, the matter is simple. Someone in the department simply has to open the file, pull the material out, and spend 5 or 6 minutes at the copy machine. However, I am now concerned that government is trying to play out the string and wait for the House to close before providing these materials to the House. Mr. Speaker, these are matters of some urgency. The island public already knows about Atlantic Lottery's plans to exploit islanders and Atlantic Canadians, but it's also known that it is also important to know who benefited from these plans and, for example, whether bonuses were paid to reward these actions. Therefore, I look forward to the fast delivery of answers to these questions so that debate on these important matters can continue in full and in light of day. Thank you.
The honourable member from Tyne Valley, Shorebrook, the opposition whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've talked at length in this House about our frontline healthcare workers, and for good reason. Islanders have always known the important role that these professionals play in our communities, and this past year has only highlighted this. We've had motions thanking our frontline healthcare workers where many of us have stood up and praised them for their work. They deserve every word of thanks that we have offered. But then healthcare workers respond with their challenges and concerns, and suddenly some members of this House become quiet or even worse, defensive. The number one issue that I'm hearing from healthcare workers is the lack of respect and value that they feel from this government. It is ironic, given how often government says they value them. But when you look at what government has actually done, you start to understand the issue. It's no surprise to anyone here that healthcare workers are overworked. Government has thrown some money towards recruitment, and that's a good step. But we need to retain the professionals that we have. We need innovative recruitment approaches. We need to move beyond incentive tunnel vision. Innovative recruitment approaches also serve to act as retention supports. If we implement supports that workers want and need, more professionals will want to work on PEI, and those who are here will want to stay. It's a win-win. The opposition have brought forward some such initiatives in our operational budget requests. Would these initiatives require some work and costs to implement? Yes. Are our healthcare workers worth it? We think and know that they are. We have discussed the possibility of 80% contracts or a 4-day work week for public employees, including healthcare workers. This would mean full-time pay, but 80% work. Difficult? Yes. But what an impact this would have on work-life balance that our healthcare professionals are asking for. Wouldn't it also be a major incentive to come and work on PEI? Childcare, Mr. Speaker, is one issue that so many healthcare workers struggle with. The long hours, the shift work making finding childcare a struggle. In our budget submission, our caucus requested dedicated childcare facilities on hospital premises for essential workers. We also requested an essential worker bonus for those workers who did not qualify for the last financial incentive last spring. Again, a small show of value and respect. Our healthcare staff have gone over and above this past year. Our physicians, nurses, paramedics, physiotherapists, respiratory therapists, and so on and so forth have all worked so hard. The opposition firmly believes that we need to start seeing action behind the pretty words, and we will continue to hold this government's feet to the fire until we see it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford, and the opposition, who's leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For many years, advocates for the protection of land in the province have been warning about loopholes in the Lands Protection Act that would permit circumvention of the land holdings in the Act. The 2019 sale of Brendel Farms to an Irving-related company is alleged to have circumvented the Act by selling a corporation rather than the land, and therefore did not require the usual approval from Executive Council. The Island Regulatory and Appeals Commission subsequently conducted an extensive investigation, which was eventually subpoenaed and reviewed by the Standing Committee on Health and Social Development. In this report on the IRAC investigation, the committee recommended the following. Your committee recommends that an amendment be made to the Prince Edward Island Lands Protection Act to require Lieutenant Governor and Council approval when the ownership of a corporation with aggregate land holdings greater than 5 acres or shore frontage greater than 65 acres changes hands. Mr. Speaker, IRAC presented to the Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability Committee in February of this year, and when asked what part of the Act should be reviewed, the CEO pointed to the transfer of shares of a corporation when land holdings, with land holdings as part of the transaction, as this does not trigger an application to IRAC. This is a loophole. Mr. Speaker, this government is showing that they have no more commitment than the former governments when it comes to doing the hard work of implementing recommendations. This government has been promising to bring forward LPA legislation in the next sitting since they were elected. This government has sat idle for 6 months with answers sitting in their lap. This government has deliberately chosen to delay legislative changes that islanders have been asking for. Yesterday, they again said legislation will not be coming until the next sitting. As legislators, we have an obligation to make legislation better to benefit islanders. When we have knowledge that will improve legislation and reduce loopholes,
then we have an obligation to proceed. Mr. Speaker, I'm currently working with Parliamentary Council to prepare legislation to implement the recommendations of the Standing Committee. It is my hope to table the legislation and debate it before the end of this sitting. Islanders have waited long enough. This amendment won't fix everything, but it will eliminate one loophole. This is what Islanders expect of us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions by members, starting with response to questions taken as notice. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, Public Safety and Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member of Summerside Wilmot has requested more information around non-disclosure agreements or NDAs in the context of sexual assault and sexual violence. Mr. Speaker, I support survivors of sexual assault and sexual violence. It is my understanding that the provincial government does not have a practice of utilizing non-disclosure agreements as it relates to the incidents in workplace. The provincial government takes allegations of sexual violence and assaults very seriously and has proposes in place that provide for disciplinary action and active reporting to authorities. Non-disclosure agreements must not limit the rights of survivors of sexual assaults and sexual violence. Mr. Speaker, the member asked around NDAs and the ability for victims to report their experiences to authorities. Currently, if someone has been a victim of a crime, NDAs do not prevent them from reporting this to law enforcement. These issues raised by the member are being studied by the Provincial Coordinated Response to Adult Sexual Violence Task Force. Preliminary research has shown that no provincial or territory jurisdictions in Canada have made any legislative changes around non-disclosure agreements. The goal of this policy work being undertaken is to determine how provincial laws can be strengthened in these cases and what changes will be necessary. It is possible that legislative changes might mean new act or possibly amendments to existing laws. Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for her questions, and I will bring forward a further update when I have more details. Thank you.
Anyone else? For a first question, I'll call upon the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks so much, Speaker. Many systems depend on diversity for their resilience and for their health. From a forest ecosystem to an investment portfolio, diversity provides strength and protection against sudden collapse. Conversely, reliance on single entities, whether that's a single crop or putting all your savings in one investment basket, invites potential disaster and creates weaknesses and vulnerability. Question to the Minister of Agriculture and Land. Do you think that it's important for the continued prosperity of island farming that we maintain and expand diversity in the crops that we grow here?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Land.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question across, Mr. Speaker. Of course, that's why we currently are doing the alternative crop study, Mr. Speaker. It's a direction with climate change and the changing of the world economics, Mr. Speaker. We have to look at new crops, and I can't wait for the results from this study, and we continue to push new industries, new crops, Mr. Speaker, new avenues, so we can pursue alternative crops on this island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Speaker. So crop rotation is one of the critical parts to soil health and also for economic prosperity for island farmers. And with the changing weather patterns, introducing new products and new varieties of existing crops that are suited to rapidly changing climate and that will actually provide useful income to farmers is going to be a critical part of maintaining a strong agricultural sector here on Prince Edward Island. Another question to the same minister. What new crops or cultivars do you imagine will come from the alternative crop study you just cited in order to secure a successful future for island farmers?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Land.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're working with the Perennial Crop Development Program, Mr. Speaker, which will bring new perennial crops, Mr. Speaker, so we're not turning the soil over as much, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to new opportunities. The wild blueberry is one, Mr. Speaker, that we have a great opportunity to to grow that industry, Mr. Speaker, and it's an industry that we kind of start talking about sequestering carbon, Mr. Speaker, selling carbon credits, Mr. Speaker. We have to look at new ways that farmers can make money across this island, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to the research that is on this alternative crop program, Mr. Speaker, that we're looking at, and it's yet to be determined, but it's exciting times for agriculture here on this island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Speaker. Yeah, indeed, the low tillage or even no tillage farming, which is going on in some parts of the world now, is unfortunately not possible to do with root crops, but with all sorts of other things that we grow, it is entirely possible, and I'm glad to hear the Minister specifically talk about that. For island farmers to diversify their operations successfully, it's essential that the infrastructure to support it is there also. And that could be local slaughterhouses, it could be appropriate storage facilities, or reliable markets for their products. A question to the same Minister. What role do you think government needs to play in supporting island farmers to diversify their operations?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Land.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's great that the opposition parties asking agriculture questions, Mr. Speaker, because this government is all about agriculture. We know that's the driver of our economy here, Mr. Speaker. We know it's the basis of our rural communities, Mr. Speaker. And when the question you ask, we're talking about the ecosystem, Mr. Speaker. The ecosystem that includes cattle, manure to build the soil, Mr. Speaker. It's it all works in the system, Mr. Speaker. And the government's role here is to support local. We need to support the buy local, support our local abattoirs, and Mr. Speaker. But we also have to focus on new markets, Mr. Speaker, because we're an exporting island, Mr. Speaker. We have beautiful land here, Mr. Speaker, that we need to protect, to build, so we can continue to export around the world, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Speaker. I couldn't agree more, Minister, that we need to support local and that we need to look for new markets. And that's why I was so sad to discover recently that WA Grains in Slemon Park has gone into receivership at a time when increasing diversity of crops on the island is seen as a critical component of building a resilient and sustainable agricultural sector here. This is really tough news. A question to the Minister of Agriculture and Land. What are your hopes for the future of this facility?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Land.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it was sad news that we got a few weeks ago about WA Grains, Mr. Speaker, because we had so much hopes for this this business, Mr. Speaker, with their the pulses and the peas, Mr. Speaker. It's a great opportunity here on this island, Mr. Speaker. And I'm confident that this business won't be down long, Mr. Speaker. I'm confident that we'll be able to solve this situation, Mr. Speaker, and maybe strengthen it within made in PEI solution, Mr. Speaker, because I can't talk about the finances about that, Mr. Speaker, but I think we can definitely move forward on new ownership or very quickly, Mr. Speaker, so we won't have too much downtime. Thank you.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, and I understand why the Minister is not being so candid in his remarks, but I do appreciate the fact that you're looking for a made on Prince Edward Island solution here, and the government needs to be involved. I'm quite intrigued by that and look forward to finding out more. WA Grains has outstanding loans to the province, of course, up measuring $4 million or so. But the infrastructure in Slemon Park is a brand new state-of-the-industry facility, and it represents a value, an asset which is considerably more than the loans outstanding to government. Its use for storage of grains and pulses was of real value as it supported island farmers to grow these new crops and to diversify and look for new markets, as the Minister just said. If this facility was to disappear or become storage for something else, it will represent a significant loss to the future of island farming. Question to the Minister. Is government considering the possibility of taking over the facility to maintain this valuable infrastructure for island farmers?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Honourable Member, you're absolutely right. There was a loan through Finance PEI for WA Grains. The loan is, there's all kinds of collateral there where government is in a good position. So we're waiting to see what happens through receivership. But one thing I can tell you, in the short period of 2 weeks, there's been all kinds of interest in that facility, a lot of local interest in that facility, and I really don't see it being down too long. I do know WA Grains wants to see island farmers thrive, so I'm quite confident they'll continue working with local farmers as well, and we'll see how this receivership goes, and government will be at the table when the time comes to work with whoever the new ownership will be. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People who do not speak English as their first language are a significant part of our island fabric. Newcomers study hard to improve their English as part of their immigration requirements. However, complex or critical public information that should be available to them in their native language is not always possible. During COVID, this has become even more important. The PEI Association for Newcomers to Canada provides information in English, French, Arabic, simplified Chinese, Korean, Persian, Russian, Spanish, and Vietnamese, and has COVID facts and immunization information. The PEI government website provides information only in English and French. Question for the Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture and the Minister responsible for immigration. How does this government expect all islanders, including those for whom English or French is not their primary language, to comply with COVID restrictions if they don't have access to that information?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and very good point, honourable member. So this has been a concern of mine, not only during COVID, but since we come in here 2 years ago. So obviously the department provides organizations with funding, but we provide a very important role on our immigration side of it. And this is where once we started touring across Prince Edward Island and meeting some of those people to find out, you know, some of the barriers, and language was one of them. It was very frustrating on their part, and I can only imagine coming from another country would be overwhelming for any one of us, and not to be able to provide simple things like questions on health care due to language barriers, getting a driver's license, transportation to work. So this was something that we've been working on, and one thing that we're planning on doing, if it hasn't already started, I'll get an update. We are going to put staff on the road to go to different businesses and organizations to discuss the problems, find where the areas are, and work with all those involved to help improve those barriers.
The honourable member from Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The most recent COVID info on the PEI Association for Newcomers site is from December 2020 and March 2021. Most recently, we've had significant changes to the current requirements and restrictions around COVID, including the restrictions on leaving the province and on gatherings. We're hearing from the community that there is a significant lack of current information and significant confusion around travel restrictions and gathering sizes in particular. Question for the same minister. We already know that government doesn't currently have those resources internally, though it's great to hear you're planning on expanding them to provide that information in multiple languages. What relationship does government have with the PEI Association for Newcomers and other critical community partners to make this a priority right now?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I would have to go back to the department to see some of the calls that are coming in, but what I can say is the department is quite involved with all the organizations out there to try and improve the barriers of where they're at. I've often said that I can't fix an issue if I don't know it's there, so I'll certainly go back to the department to see how many calls are coming in on this, and if it is a barrier and we need to try and do our best to fix it, I'll certainly make sure our department reaches out to all organizations involved to see what we need to do for supports and provide more if we have to. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Seniors with dementia are some of our most vulnerable citizens. It's critical that we protect them and treat them with dignity and respect. Question to the Minister of Health. Is keeping dementia patients in hospital who don't require hospital services, treating them with dignity and respect?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honourable member for the question. Certainly it is an important one. You look across the various services that the Department of Health and Wellness, but even more so that Health PEI provides, Mr. Speaker. Certainly you look at the number of long-term care, publicly operated long-term care homes that we have, Mr. Speaker. And in those homes, there are 148 designated dementia care beds, Mr. Speaker. So I think it does, it speaks to, yes, we do have this as a priority, but like in other areas, Mr. Speaker, is there more of it we can do? Absolutely. Thank you.
Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Building long-term care facilities for patients with Alzheimer's or dementia typically involves wards where patients are unable to wander off. In the name of safety, many are unable to, for instance, to go outside. Question to the Minister. When will you start building long-term care facilities where quality of life is a major consideration?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I think that quality of life in all of our facilities is a major consideration. And I have to go back to the member statement here earlier today from the official opposition, Mr. Speaker, where the member referenced the tremendous job that our healthcare workers do. And that is not just in our acute care facilities, Mr. Speaker, but it's also in our long-term care facilities. And that is one of the primary things that they keep in mind, Mr. Speaker, day in and day out, is providing the very best quality of life to the residents not in that facility, but in that home, Mr. Speaker, because our long-term care facilities, they are that Islanders' home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, but there was no implication that the staff aren't treating the patients. Wonderful. I was speaking about the built facilities. In some countries like Denmark, for instance, you're not allowed to confine their residents even if they suffer from Alzheimer's or dementia. They employ tracing bracelets or accompany with staff instead. Question to the Minister. When will you start testing and employing alternative methods like tracing bracelets?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I've said here before, Mr. Speaker, I think that we always have to be open to new ideas, new initiatives, and I do appreciate the member for bringing this forward. I'd be happy to have a conversation with him in more detail with regard to some of the experience and knowledge that he has from Denmark, and to have that discussion with him, Mr. Speaker. And again, I do appreciate the member bringing this suggestion forward. Thank you.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A friend of mine was telling me over the weekend that when she was a student, she was told that she learned differently than the others. She learned about her learning style, and then she was plunked back into the mainstream classroom, feeling even more lost, alienated, and left behind. I bet there are some members in this House who could look back at their own time in school and recognize that they had a different learning style than the one being used. Question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning. How do we accommodate the various learning styles in our island schools?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member, for sharing that individual story with the House, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I think we can all agree that we all come from different backgrounds, and we certainly all learn very differently, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that is precisely why we have so many individuals within our school system, whether it's our occupational therapists, our EAs, our teachers, our counselors, all of these individuals who are supporting the individual needs of our students, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm still getting myself familiarized with this file, and most certainly I do look to the member across for some of her experience within the education system. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy and I'd welcome some of those conversations, because certainly there are opportunities to do better, and I'd like to work together to ensure that we are adequately providing service to those students who need it. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Mr. Speaker, here in Prince Edward Island, we use an inclusion model in our island schools, which essentially means that all attempts are made to keep students in their classrooms for learning for as much of the day as we can. I was happy to hear that there is a review happening on this. I think it's really important that we take a look at how we can do even better. Question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning. Can you please provide us with an update on this review and provide us with timelines on when we may see this report?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I understand that the department is working very hard to bring this report forward, and absolutely, once it's ready, I will bring it to the House. Mr. Speaker, our teachers, our education staff, they just do an amazing job addressing learning styles, Mr. Speaker. Our curriculum consultants, our coaches, Mr. Speaker. I understand that this report is important to the honourable member, and I'll endeavour to get it back as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More and more students get taken out of the classroom for an infinite number of reasons: resource support, behavioral resource support, EAL support, speech-language pathology support, occupational therapy support, literacy supports, and the list goes on and on. It is extremely disruptive and really hard to keep track of. But one thing is clear: there's an increasing number of students who do not learn the way the system is designed to teach them. Maybe the system is wrong. What if we flipped it and gave the consistency to teachers and students, adding in different approaches to learning that will benefit all students? Question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning: have we ever considered bringing resource teachers into the classrooms so that all students have the benefit to learn in different ways?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Mr. Speaker, and again, thank you, honourable member, for an excellent question. Mr. Speaker, again, our teachers, all of our school staff, they do an incredible job ensuring that different learning styles are accommodated, Mr. Speaker. We have a joint teachers learning committee, and I know one of my directors, she actually co-chairs that committee with the PEITF, Mr. Speaker. Again, I'm still a relatively new minister. I'm open to all ideas, Mr. Speaker, and suggestions, and I look forward to working with the honourable member on this. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We were happy to have our motion passed in the House on play-based learning. Play-based learning and project-based learning are the best ways to get kids engaged in learning. We know that lots of teachers do this on their own, but they need support and they need resources. We need more curriculum that makes this easy to implement. We need leadership to come alongside our teachers to make this change easier for them, because we know it will be enjoyable and beneficial to all of our students and our educators. Question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning: who will you be engaging in this process, and what changes will we see coming this fall?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for bringing forward this motion. We spoke about it in caucus, and I think we all agreed that we need to ensure that play-based learning is incorporated into our school system, and it starts at an early age, Mr. Speaker. I've spoke so often about my small kids, my 3 and my 5-year-old, how important it is for them, and every time I hear and I pick them up and I hear about what they've done throughout the day, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I am looking forward to getting back to the department, working with the director, working with stakeholders, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we bring the amount of play up in our schools, Mr. Speaker. We're already doing so much, but there's always more. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're seeing a growing number of potato farmers planting pollinator strips in their crop rotation. There's also initiatives through some watersheds and residents recognizing the need to provide forage for native pollinators. That got a constituent of mine that works in the road construction industry thinking about the highway seed mix that is currently being used. A question to the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure: given the amount of road construction that is occurring here in PEI, will you commit to reviewing the specification of the highway seed mix and raise the percentage of that mixture that would benefit native pollinators?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and that's certainly an excellent question. And yeah, we're working jointly with all concerned departments to ensure that we're doing everything possible to strengthen the pollinators here in PEI. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cornwall, Meadowbanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A number of weeks ago, the Premier told the House that he expects a new carbon agreement with Ottawa by the 1st of September. There is an expectation that this new agreement will cause an increase in the cost of home heating and gasoline. Will the Minister of Finance please provide the House with some sort of forecast of potential price increases as a result of these negotiations?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the question. We are working with the federal government to see what that looks like. I do not have a figure right in front of me, honourable member, but I'll be happy to bring that back to the House.
The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the operating budget projects enormous increase in revenues from the carbon levy from about 16 million to 35.4 million. That money is coming from somewhere, and as we all know, these large changes can create both winners and losers. Many industries and sectors are concerned. Many need to plan their businesses around this issue, Mr. Speaker. Are there any groups that the minister is aware of are being consulted? And is the Premier's Economic Recovery Council one of those groups?
The honourable minister. Premier.
I think the honourable member is directing the questions toward me, so perhaps I should try to get up and respond to them, even if he hasn't fingered me directly here. Mr. Speaker, as we have said here before, we're in negotiations with the federal government toward the next negotiation with the carbon pricing arrangement, Mr. Speaker. The discussions with the federal government are different than they were last time. The federal government is not as open to trying to do some one-offs that they were ready to do the last time, Mr. Speaker. And I don't think that we need to view this from a perspective of winners and losers, Mr. Speaker. I think every Prince Edward Islander knows that the climate is changing around us and we have to do everything we possibly can to stem that, Mr. Speaker. So I really think that when we're in a position to make public what exactly those discussions are going to do, we will do that in plenty of time, Mr. Speaker. But those negotiations continue with the Federal Minister of Environment.
Cornwall Meadowbanks for second supplementary.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Many quarters understood the best option for the carbon levy is direct rebates to islanders. Clean Prosperity, an organization that works on market-based solutions to reduce emissions, estimates that a family of 4 in Ontario will have a rebate of about $2,000 in 2030, and Saskatchewan will see about $3,800 in 2030, directly given back to residents of those provinces. But I seem to be getting a sense that this government may prefer to keep some of the revenue and dole it out based on their own agenda or projects. My question to the Premier, will all of these increased revenues be returned to islanders, not in the form of rebate, but direct checks?
The Honourable Premier.
Speaker, I can promise the honourable member that won't be done through licenses and registration, Mr. Speaker, which is what was the chosen course of action by the previous government, Mr. Speaker. I think what we're trying to do, Mr. Speaker, is to take the money that will be generated through the increased carbon pricing, Mr. Speaker, and share it with islanders, Mr. Speaker, and those who would be most affected would benefit the most. Obviously, that's how our plan is being worked upon, Mr. Speaker. And I also think that it's incumbent upon us to try to do everything that we can possibly do to help those who need it the most, to convert how they do things, Mr. Speaker, to reduce their use on fossil fuels. And that's what we're also looking at doing as well, Mr. Speaker. But I can promise this House that 80% at a very minimum, Mr. Speaker, will be rebated back, and that will be escalating and changed as we help people get off of fossil fuels with some other additional programs. But every cent of this money from carbon tax will go to help islanders reduce their fossil fuel dependency, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Over the course of this sitting, the Liberal caucus has asked 117 questions to the Minister of Health and Wellness. Now, that's a fairly large number of questions, Mr. Speaker, but it's very little compared to the number of questions the Minister actually asked himself. So, in fact, our current estimate is the Minister has asked himself questions roughly 230 times. One of his favorite questions is, can we do better? One of his favorite questions is, can we do better? Yes, the Minister replies. And another is this a challenge? Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. But it appears the Minister can only answer his own questions. So today, I will keep it quite simple. And I would plead with the Minister, don't ask yourself meaningless questions, just answer my question. What is the current shortage of psychiatrists?
Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, I'm flattered that with a number of questions, the importance that when they're in the position of third party, the importance that they put on health care as compared to when they were actually in power themselves. So it's great to see this awakening that they've suddenly come to realize. Mr. Speaker, you know, a number of questions, and absolutely, if it's not a good question, probably the best thing for me to do is ask myself a question that I will answer, Mr. Speaker, because sometimes the questions that are coming forward from the members of the third party are just, they're questions that I really don't know why they would be putting them forward. But on a more serious matter note, Mr. Speaker, the question that the member does bring forward is a good one. I am going to get back to the House. I am going to get back to the House with the exact numbers, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. And I anticipate his next question will be another good one for a change.
The Honourable Minister, or the Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'll go back and correct that now. It's 231 because he just asked himself another question during that. So again, all I'm going to do is just ask a very simple question. Just the last one was a very simple question. All it was one number. That's all I was asking. So now I'm going to ask you again a simple question. How many nurses do we need to recruit to ensure appropriate access to health care for all Islanders?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the answer to that question is a tremendous amount more nurses than what the previous administration ever recruited. And that's why we have the initiatives that we are putting in place, Mr. Speaker. Yes, are there a lot of vacancies right across the board with regard to nursing positions? Absolutely. But that is why this administration, compared to the previous one, is actually taking this matter serious, that we are putting in place incentives for recruitment. We hear suggestions from the opposition that I think are worthy of listening to, of moving forward on and collaborating on, rather than the continuous negativity that we see from the third party who, let's face it, did never have a plan. No plan.
Tignish Palmer Road, your second supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now it's back to answering questions that were asked yesterday. So again, I'll tell you what it is. We have almost 200 vacancies with nursing. Yeah, there you go. So you don't even have to go looking for it. I'll give you an answer. So Minister, I'm going to ask you another question, and all I'm asking for a number, just a number, all right? Since the Minister clearly struggles with retaining physicians, in the last 2 months, how many exit surveys have been conducted with departing doctors? And if your answer is 0, why?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the exit surveys that have been conducted, we have to realize, Mr. Speaker, that it's not the member's previous question was with regard to nursing, now doctors. And they are both extremely important, and that's why, as compared again to the previous administration, who never conducted an exit survey, who didn't know anything with regard to the Family Physicians of Canada and their promotion of medical homes and neighborhoods, didn't have any idea about that, Mr. Speaker. We are taking the bull by the horns. We realize that retention is every bit as important as recruitment, and Mr. Speaker, that is why we are doing exit surveys of healthcare professionals that, for whatever reason, may be leaving the healthcare system in PEI. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, recently I've been contacted by a group of concerned Islanders regarding a development taking place on the Bayshore Road in Stanhope. This area is ecologically sensitive because of its barrier between bodies of fresh water and salt water, and is also home to many local species of birds and wildlife. Residents had concerns about the environmental impact on this development, as shown by the 86-person petition I will table under tabling of petitions. However, the municipality denied them an opportunity to share concerns publicly. My question is to the Minister of Fisheries and Communities. Why was there no notice of intent issued to residents for this building permit as required by the MGA regulations?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. I am very familiar with this area and have had probably 2 or 3 briefings in the last while about this. And actually, I'm working in conjunction with the Minister of Lands on the issue. And I am willing to meet with the residents out there if they have concerns. And if they have any concerns particular to the MGA, they can forward to me and I'll have them answered. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These 86 individuals are left feeling that they weren't given the right to publicly outline their questions and potential concerns with this development. While the original proposal to subdivide this property was denied, the new plan is seeing a 1.5-story, 1,200 square foot accessory building being built. That sounds like a pretty big mini barn to me, Mr. Speaker. A flood risk assessment was conducted at the location of this development, which I will table later as well. And that assessment included 70% of the parcel is located below 2-meter elevation, meaning the property has a high coastal flood risk. Question to the Minister of Fisheries and Communities. Why did your government permit this construction of a property that is at high risk of coastal flooding?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, when permits for development come in, they actually go to the Minister of Lands and they come over to my department for review. I will commit today to have a look into this and see where the application actually sits, and I will get back to this House and the honourable member with an answer. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the third party, second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It certainly seems there has been some favoritism granted to the developers throughout this process, perhaps due to their political connection to the current administration. Public meetings were avoided, permits were granted despite high coastal flood risks, and it seems there has been no consideration of the impacts on the environment and habitat in this area. Typically, when development is conducted in areas that border national parks, Parks Canada is consulted to ensure any concerns they have be addressed. Question to the Minister of Fisheries and Communities. Was Parks Canada consulted regarding this development on Bayshore Road in Stanhope? And if not, why?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would caution the honourable member of making accusations of any political nature. I will commit today to look into this matter immediately and bring an answer back to the honourable member in this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Montague-Kilbjorn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization stated that mRNA vaccines were preferred over the viral vector-based ones. Question to the Minister of Health. Is there a concern that Islanders who have received the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine might be hesitant and not want to receive the second dose?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member for the question. Certainly a very important question that he does raise, Mr. Speaker. I personally had the AstraZeneca vaccine. And I'm looking forward to when my second vaccination with AstraZeneca can take place. I personally have not heard those concerns from Islanders, but I think, Mr. Speaker, we look at Chief Public Health Office, the direction that they have taken us over the last 14 months since the pandemic began. I will continue to rely on their advice. It has served us well so far, Mr. Speaker, and have faith that it will continue to. Thank you.
Montague-Kilbjorn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there is good news that PEI will be receiving a significant number of vaccines over the next month or so, with increased shipments from Pfizer and Moderna. In my district a couple of weeks ago, I think there's one pharmacy in my area that was administering the AstraZeneca vaccine, and I know the Moderna vaccine will be offered at pharmacies. I think it was starting May 17th, if I'm correct. I was hoping, but I think it will only be to those 50 and above, in the next week 40 and above. I was kind of disappointed. I was hoping that perhaps we might open that up to anyone in the general public 18 and above that would want to receive the Moderna vaccine. That age group has been waiting quite patiently for quite a long time now, and I guess my question is with this increased number of doses that we will be receiving, is it possible that we could look at offering the vaccine to that younger age group sooner?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member for the question. He is absolutely right with regard to shipments of both Pfizer and Moderna. As of last information I had, that there will be our first shipment of Moderna received here in the island. I believe it is on May 15th, and then subsequent to that, in addition to both AstraZeneca and Moderna, that pharmacies across the island will be partnering with the government to get the vaccinations carried out as rapidly as possible. As the member is certainly aware, there's groups that have been designated by CPHO as far as the priority groups are concerned, and we will be continuing with that. But certainly suggestions that the member may have, I would be more than happy to take them back to CPHO. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Monica Kilmore, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right now, as I had mentioned, only a certain number of pharmacies were administering the vaccines. I'm assuming that's because of a capacity issue. You know, there's only so many doses available at the time. As we do receive more doses, is it possible that all pharmacies on PEI, if they're willing and able to, can offer the vaccine to get shots into Islanders' arms quicker?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I think the two words that the honourable member used, willing and able, are certainly very important because of space limitations. I know certain pharmacies would not be able to provide that service, but certainly, Mr. Speaker, as I understand it, that it is being looked at what other pharmacies over and above the ones that are presently providing the vaccinations, what other pharmacies may be able to. Just in closing, Mr. Speaker, I really encourage all Islanders, when it does become their turn to have the vaccination, to have the vaccine, to get it when that time comes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Mr. Speaker. Futurepreneur has recently launched the Black Entrepreneur Startup Program, BESP, an initiative funded by the Royal Bank of Canada with additional loan financing from the Business Development Bank of Canada. The program is a tailored version of Futurepreneur's startup program, which offers up to $60,000 in financing, plus expert mentorship and resources to Black aspiring entrepreneurs aged 18 to 39 across Canada. Question to the Minister of Economic Development, Tourism and Culture. Will this program be available to Black aspiring entrepreneurs in PEI?
The Honourable Minister of Economic, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, honourable members. So, good question. I'm not familiar with that exact program, but I can tell you the programs that we are working on in our department. So, as of last week, we had the Black Culture Society in to get their input on what they would like to see some of the programming be, as well if we could do a partnership with them as well to help support the business community. So I know my deputy and Tamara from the Black Culture Society have had some great conversations, and within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're supposed to be ready to announce some of those programs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown Belvedere, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We do have a tendency to miss programs that are available federally just because sometimes we just don't know they're there. So it's really important when there's a program like this that's rolling out across Canada that we make sure that possible entrepreneurs in PEI are at the table too. There have been some challenges with Futurepreneur as a program generally, often because it requires very stringent credit ratings that young entrepreneurs just don't have. So, Minister, there's two things there. One of them is coordination with Futurepreneur Atlantic to make sure that we are at the table to offer this as an option. We shouldn't be leaving our young entrepreneurs behind, and that when you are working with those cultural partners, will you ensure that they are consulted to be able to help ensure that they are able to access this program?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and very good point, honourable member. I will go back to the department. I'm sure there's been some discussions on that program that I might not have been privy to, but I'll certainly go back and make sure that is happening, and if not, we'll make sure that my department does reach out and we do get a spot at that table. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
End of question period. Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, Public Safety and the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have spoken in this House about how the trauma caused by sexual violence and how has far-reaching impacts to our society. There are supports like Victim Services, the PEI Rape and Sexual Assault Center, and RISE program through the Community Legal Information. There is also enhanced emergency sexual assault services available at all island emergency rooms. Finally, today, Mr. Speaker, I am able to announce that everything is in place for the PEI's third option services, an extension of the ESATs. The service allows survivors of sexual assault to have evidence stored anonymously for up to 1 year and gives them more time to consider if they want to make complaint to police. Instead, they can focus on getting immediate medical attention and supports. In the past 18 months, the Department of Justice, Public Safety, Health and Wellness, Health PEI, Interministerial Women's Secretariat, all the police forces, RCMP and municipal, and the PEI Rape and Sexual Assault Center worked to develop strong person-centered protocol using trauma-enforced approach. Everything is in place, the training, policies, storage, and transportation. So all this program can run smoothly without causing any additional and unnecessary trauma to survivors. They can focus on healing first. Mr. Speaker, the most important thing for me and my colleagues has always been to ensure that any victim of sexual violence has supports to help with their healing and the time they need to make their decision. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Minister, I could not be more happy to hear something today. Thank you for that. It's been frustrating, as has been made quite obvious, that by the media outlet reports and then hearing that sexual violence is a priority and seeing some things right in front of us that could really help and waiting for that. And so this announcement today is so important for survivors of sexual assault. And I'm not going to speak long on this because I've said lots about this, and I think that there's been lots of debate around this in the House, and I think the most important thing here is that the more we listen to survivors and the more of what they say is reflected in our policies, programs, and services, the better the treatment is, and it's truly responsive and truly what survivors need to heal and move forward. And we know that without healing, there is no moving forward in a healthy way. So, Minister, thank you so much for that, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member from Charlottetown, West Royalty.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Minister for this very important announcement today. Islanders have been waiting for this announcement ever since it appeared in the 2019 PC platform, and while there are some delays, I'm glad you took a little bit extra time to get it right, because this is something we needed to get right. The third option program allowed victims of sexual assault additional time to process trauma they've experienced and decide if they wish to pursue legal action. When an individual experiences trauma, they can be affected in a variety of different ways, and that can impact their decision to seek justice. By preserving evidence of an assault for up to a year, we are ensuring victims have the time to process what happened to them and how they wish to proceed. We still have much work to do in supporting victims of sexual assault. PEI has the highest number of unfounded sexual assault cases in Canada, which essentially means police decide a crime hasn't occurred. We also know these statistics don't tell the whole story, as many people don't come forward with complaints due to lack of faith in the system. This program was a great first start, and we still have much work to do. I thank the Minister for bringing this forward, and I hope to see this important issue remain a priority for government now and into the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, today we celebrate International Day of the Midwife, a day to recognize and honor midwives. Midwifery is a valuable service that will provide a wide range of benefits to island families. Midwives are primary care providers who care for their clients before and throughout pregnancy, labor, birth, and the postpartum period. Mr. Speaker, midwives are experts in low-risk, normal pregnancy and birth. And midwives work collaboratively with other healthcare providers, including obstetricians, family physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses, lactation consultants, and others. And Mr. Speaker, staff at Health PEI and the Department of Health and Wellness have been working diligently behind the scenes to establish midwifery services for women in Prince Edward Island. We are committed to ensuring island families have access to high-quality and sustainable maternal care options. Mr. Speaker, significant progress has already been made to add this important service to the complement of options. Health PEI and the Department of Health and Wellness have set up a midwifery services steering committee to guide the midwifery development process. The committee has a variety of members with diverse backgrounds and perspectives, working together to develop a sustainable, high-quality maternity care system for island families. Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to welcome Gisela Becker as our Midwifery Chief Advisor. She has extensive experience in all aspects of midwifery practice, including clinical service in a variety of settings and models, introduction and integration of new initiatives, regulation, practice framework, and theoretical and clinical teaching. Gisela has been sharing her expert advice to help ensure PEI's midwifery program meets high-quality standards. Also, Mr. Speaker, Melissa Roberts was hired recently as the midwifery program development lead consultant. Since becoming a registered midwife in 2013, Melissa has worked in both Ontario and Alberta. She was born and raised in Newfoundland and Labrador and is eager to see midwifery services expand to become a choice for families in Atlantic Canada. Mr. Speaker, community engagement is an extremely important part of this process. Recently, government engaged with midwifery organizations and leaders to hear and learn from their input, thoughts, and ideas. Engagement will also take place with internal stakeholders such as physicians, other healthcare providers, and leaders within Health PEI and government throughout May and June. We will also be engaging with community partners and the public starting in May. Mr. Speaker, a final report of findings from the engagement process, including strategic recommendations for change management, will be presented to the Midwifery Steering Committee and Health PEI senior management at the end of July. Mr. Speaker, regulations for midwifery are currently being developed, and when that is completed, midwives will be the first group regulated under the Registered Health Professions Act. Province-wide regulation will ensure quality service that enhances maternity care for women on PEI. Mr. Speaker, a working group has been established to support this process required to develop the regulations. I want to commend all those involved with the planning and implementation of midwifery services here in PEI, and also those who have advocated strongly for this service. A great deal of progress has been made, and I am pleased to see this important work is continuing to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
You would have noted a distinct lack of enthusiasm on this side of the room for that announcement, Minister, unlike the previous announcement that was very definitive and offered, as you put it at the end of your statement, moving forward. This is not moving forward. This process is stalled, and it's been stalled for far, far too long. Announcements on implementing midwifery in the only province without this critical service, it's felt an awful lot like a never-ending series of Braxton Hicks contractions. Exciting and perhaps a signal of something important on the way, but they've always led to precisely nothing, and that we got that precisely nothing again today. Every time I think that finally this government is going to get something done, I'm disappointed. And I wonder when actually the time will come when, and I use this word advisedly, this government will deliver. Because countless women and families across this province certainly hope it's going to happen soon. It's been far too long. Last year, government made a budget promise in response to a priority from the official opposition to commit the necessary funds to establish midwifery on PEI. That was 2 years ago. And we had an explicit promise from the former minister that midwifery services would be available on PEI for all mothers 15 months ago. Well, January 2020 is long gone, of course, and the budget cycle is now complete. And once again, no baby. Joyce England and so many other people in our province who have been patiently, so patiently, attending to this particularly long and difficult gestation period deserve enormous amounts of thanks and credit for coming forward to government with a fully costed plan on how to properly establish midwifery services all across Prince Edward Island for all women who want them. This is not a mystery. We don't need the establishment of another committee. We know what we have to do. We just need to do it. And today, of course, on World Maternal Health Day, we have to remember that that includes mental health, maternal mental health. And just this week in the House, we had discussions on the struggles of motherhood and including postpartum depression. And having a service available where a mother has the opportunity to develop that long-standing, strong and trusting relationship with a midwife from conception, and sometimes actually even before conception, right through to post-delivery care, is such a valuable and such a necessary and such a beautiful thing, and this government continues to deny that. I will reserve my enthusiasm once again, and I really, really hope that we'll have something to celebrate in the very near future, because as we've discovered very recently in our office, the arrival of a baby with Harper, Madeline, Howard is a beautiful thing. Everybody loves a baby, and Minister, I hope that finally you will be the proud father who gets to deliver it here on PEI, but long enough. Come on, let's get this done.
Member from Larry Inverness, third-party whip.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and I too have to kind of instill a little bit of muted enthusiasm for this this announcement as well. But I mean, I will say that the recognition of the profession today is that, and that getting Ms. Roberts, the midwifery coordinator, commencing, that is all good news. But it is a rather pitiful announcement, Mr. Speaker. You know, when we look at what midwifery provides, care to women during pregnancy and labor, postpartum period, while also providing care for the newborn child, they also help in preventing health problems during pregnancy and also can detect abnormal conditions. Midwives are highly educated by four-year university programs and clinical practices, Mr. Speaker. And I know, you know, the Leader of the Opposition mentioned the timelines here, and I do recall that I was actually the minister responsible, and as Minister of Health, to actually pass the Regulated Health Professions Act to allow the government to put together the regulations, and that's really 3 years ago that I've been minister, maybe even a little longer than that, Mr. Speaker. And so, I mean, the gestation period of this government is longer than an elephant's, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's a little bit ridiculous in that regard, Mr. Speaker. But, and I also, during my time as minister, we did launch the Women's Wellness Centre at the Prince County Hospital in Summerside, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's a matter of we created these things. It's now, you know, the reality is there's a new government in power. It's now them to take that ball and get these things up and operational, Mr. Speaker. And you know, so I certainly really question the speed of action on this, Mr. Speaker. And but I also have to acknowledge, you know, as little as this announcement is, there was an individual that was really started on this in this legislature. It was Kathleen Casey. She was really a hard advocate for a tireless advocate for midwifery in the province, Mr. Speaker. And she was in my ear constantly, and we did get the ball rolling. But really now it's up to this government to take it the rest of the way. And I'm confident that they will, Mr. Speaker. I give the minister every opportunity here to fulfill this obligation that their party had made in the last provincial election, Mr. Speaker. But let's get on with it. Let's make this gestation period a little bit quicker than that of an elephant, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Action Climate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll aim for a little more positive results over there with this. One of government's election promises was that we would plant 1 million trees a year. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report that we successfully met this promise last year and will again this year. Planting trees is extremely important to carbon sequestration and our ability to meet our net zero goals. But our forestry efforts go beyond planting trees. We also focus on responsible forest management. Our carbon capture tree program is funded in part with the federal government and aims to meet our climate targets by planting native tree species on 250 hectares of abandoned fields and other marginal lands on public and private properties across Prince Edward Island. We plan to keep this program moving forward and expanding it. A couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of speaking with the Woodlot Owners Association at their annual general meeting. It ended up being a great open conversation, and I'm thrilled at the possibility of working with this experienced group in forestry. This kind of partnership is important because 90% of the land on PEI is privately owned. We want to work together to meet our common goals of environment and land protection. So it's crucial that we work with the owners to ensure that we create programs and energy solutions that meet the needs of islanders. One of the limiting factors in planting more trees is having the land to plant them on. If there are islanders out there who have fields or unused land, please reach out to us. And we will help create a partnership to plant trees. And we will continue to explore the possibility of securing more trees so we can plant well beyond the 1 million trees a year. We're open to looking at new ideas from islanders that will help us with carbon capture, not just now, but well into the future. And you know, Mr. Speaker, trees still remain one of the best ways to capture carbon on this planet. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, being able to say that we've met the goal of planting 1 million trees is certainly a good thing, and it's something that we can be happy about. I know the State of the Forest report is due out this year. We haven't seen a State of the Forest report in this province since 2010, Mr. Speaker, so I'm really looking forward to having a sense of how we're actually doing managing our forests on Prince Edward Island, and I do expect that we're going to see our forest cover is down on PEI. And I agree with the Minister that trees are an important way for us to continue to sequester carbon, but I would remind him that protecting a hectare of forest does a lot more for us than it does to plant a new hectare of forest. So anything we can do to work with woodlot owners to find ways to incentivize keeping those trees in place in the first place, Mr. Speaker, I think is important. This is a good initiative, and I think we have to be thinking of this on both sides, both protecting the forests we have and planting new ones. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
It's a pleasure to rise and speak about island forests. We rely on our island forests for many things, but perhaps none more than to recapture carbon. We know the climate is changing despite what the Conservative Party of Canada may think, and we must modify our behaviour to reduce carbon emissions. When the Minister rose the other day and said the forests were not properly maintained in recent years, I think he either forgot or decided to leave out some information. In 2019, the former administration launched the Carbon Capture Tree Planting Program, which had a goal of returning roughly 250 hectares of fields into forests. As we know, much of PEI forest is on private land, which means programs such as this one require partnerships with private landowners. 130,000 seedlings were planted in the first year of this program. The program also sought to plant suitable native species of trees on marginal and grassy sites, including priority areas such as highly sloped lands, sites with sensitive soils, and watershed areas with low forest cover. I will give the Minister the benefit of the doubt and say he forgot this program instead of intentionally ignoring it. I also would like to thank the Minister for today's announcement regarding island forests, and I hope the Minister will take into consideration the damage that was done during the hurricane 2 years ago and all the trees that are down in local forests across the province, that maybe, if you give an incentive for someone to go in and clean it up and they could use the wood for something, maybe to help them pay their costs. But it's you drive along any highway on PEI and you see a lot of damage, and it needs to get cleaned up, and not every property owner can afford to do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
End of Minister statements. Presenting and receiving petitions. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table written questions to the Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture on the annual cost and contract details of eForce online skills training program.
Shall I carry? The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table written questions to the Minister of Social Development and Housing regarding the recent Social Programme Division employee survey reports and average caseloads.
Shall it carry?
Thank you.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table a call for justice, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls status report for the Government of Prince Edward Island dated May 2021. And I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance and the Deputy Premier, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table paper with 86 names of residents in the area raising concerns regarding environmental impacts of the Bay Shore Road development in Stanhope. And I move, second by the Honourable Member from Larry Inverness.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table a coastal erosion and flood risk assessment on the property in question, showing 70% of the property under 2 meters elevation and at high risk for coastal flooding. And I move, second by the Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road, that the said document do now receive and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table documents. The Salvation Army retained HR Atlantic to investigate allegations of discrimination at Bedford MacDonald House, a men's homeless shelter in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, of course. And this is the executive summary and investigation report. And I move, seconded by the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? Any more tabling of documents? No. Reports by committees? Motions other than government? Orders other than government? The Honourable Member for Mermaid Stratford and the Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member from Summerside Wilmot, that the 23rd order of the day now be read.
Shall it carry?
Order 23, Environmental Bill of Rights, Bill number 108, ordered for second reading.
The Honourable Member for Mermaid Stratford and the Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by Summerside Wilmot, that the said bill now be read a second time.
Shall it carry?
Carried.
Bill number 108, Environmental Bill of Rights, read a second time.
The Honourable Member from Mermaid Stratford and the Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by Summerside Wilmot, that this House do now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
Shall it carry?
Carried.
Chairman. The Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker to chair the Committee of the Whole House.
This is now in a committee of the whole House to take into consideration a bill to be intituled Environmental Bill of Rights. The request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Granted. Sure. Good afternoon. Could you please state your name and position for answered?
Michele Patterson, Research and Communications Officer with the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and welcome. Promoter, would you like to commence with a general statement on the bill's intent?
Yes, please. So this bill creates in legislation the right to a healthy environment, which a lot of people are surprised to learn we don't have currently. It specifically lays out that we are safeguarding the environment for present and future generations, and it also guarantees minimum levels of participation for islanders to involve themselves in environmental decision making. It creates an independent commissioner who would oversee this legislation. It creates a registry where ecologically sensitive projects will end up. So you have a right to a healthy environment, you have the right to participate in decision making, but what does that look like in practice? Basically what this would do is, let's take the example of the sand dune in St. Margaret's Bay that we discussed last summer. If such an ecologically sensitive project were to land on the registry and people in the area were concerned about it, they would have the ability to reach out to the commissioner and flag it for the commissioner to review. If the commissioner reviews the project and agrees that it is in fact breaching environmental rights, the commissioner would give advice to the minister on what needs to be done to make that project compliant. But if the minister refuses to make the project compliant and doesn't want to provide additional advice on why they believe the project is compliant already, it gives islanders the right to seek legal action to stop a project or repair damage that's been done. This legislation will create better outcomes for islanders and better environmental outcomes. And it will also build confidence in the public on environmental decision making.
Okay, thank you very much. Honourable members, it is now the wish of the committee that the bill be read clause by clause, section by section, part by part, or just open it up as a whole?
Just open it up first.
Okay, we open up as a whole?
Just open it up, yeah.
Okay, for general questions?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so I do have one, I have the leader of the third party.
Sure.
Okay.
Does comparable legislation exist in other provinces, and if so, how's it working?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are actually 4 other provinces that already have it, and they have since 1978. So Ontario has it, Quebec does, the Northwest Territories, and I want to say the Yukon also has it, and it's been a positive step for those provinces.
The leader of the third party.
Thank you. What consultation did you do to complete your drafting? Like, did you talk to the Federation of Agriculture and the farming community?
I didn't talk to the Federation of Agriculture specifically, but you will note this piece of legislation explicitly removes anything that's in the Farm Practices Act anyway. Anything that's already covered on that is not in scope in this bill, so that's not a concern. But we did consult with Olnaway, we spoke with EcoPEI, we spoke with the, let me see, I have a whole list here. With Citizens Alliance, the Coalition for the Protection of PEI Water. I spoke with East Coast Environmental Law, Olnaway. I reached out to the Watershed Alliance and the Judiciary, and Island Nature Trust.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Chair. So would the PEI Fishermen Association fall under the same as the agricultural sector? You didn't consult with those either?
Didn't consult with them specifically, but
for the same reason?
For the same, well, no, they're not expressly excluded from it, but they would be unlikely to find themselves on the other side of this issue. I would expect you would find they would be more likely to be bringing forward a concern to protect the environment than to be on the flip side of it. We wanted to expressly move anything that's covered in the Farm Practices Act out of it so that we don't just create nuisance legislation, essentially. But the Fishers Association is likely to be on the other side of that issue.
Okay.
Leader of the third party.
Chair, can we jump all over the place? You want us to go and see?
No, it's open. It's open for questions.
Yep. My next few questions are in sections down the road, like in 3 and 4. Okay, in section 3, it outlines the establishment of a registry, which will contain many different items. Can you give us a few current practical examples of the matters would contain in this registry?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. So the registry should have any projects that are coming forward, any developments that are coming forward will be specifically outlined on the registry. So if we were going to have a development in a wetland, for example, that would be on the registry and people would have 30 days to make their concerns known about that. It would give 30 days for the commissioner to rule that there might in fact be a contravention and give the minister advice on what needs to be changed to make it compliant. Various policies that the Environment Department has will be on the registry so that the public can see it. Basically, anything that's going to be happening that's going to require permitting through environment or transportation is largely going to be captured on the registry. Does that answer your question?
Leader of the third party?
Thanks, Sheriff. And Section 4 of this bill places constraints on government's ability to respond to environmental matters. Did you consult with the Department of Environment, Water, and Climate Action on this? And if yes, what was the feedback? And if no, why did they not consult with the department about the changes in this authority?
So, Part 4, you say?
Yep.
The establishment of the Environmental Commissioner?
Section 4, yeah.
Section 4 of not Part 4. So, Section 4 is the public's participation in decision-making. Can you clarify how you think that will be problematic for the Department of Environment?
So, well, I guess does it take away their ability to respond to environmental matters?
No, absolutely not. And just so you're aware, member, I consulted largely with the Department of Environment, Water, and Climate Action, their legal team, their deputy minister. We worked on this for hours. And there's quite a lot of leeway for the minister in this, which has been brought up by a number of groups, but I think it's fair to give the leeway that has been given. Is there a specific part in here that you feel is infringing on the minister's ability to respond to just broadly? Yeah.
And one other question, Chair, and I'll move on.
Sure, go ahead, Leader of the third party.
So Section 14 of this bill will establish a new office called the Environmental Commissioner.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And do you know how much this will cost to run this office? What will be the annual cost of running it, you know? Did you establish that?
It's a really good question. And the way that this office would be set up is the same way that any other new office is going to be set up in the Legislative Assembly, so that it would have to first go through LMC. And if LMC decided that they wanted to set it up as a part-time office, they could do that. They have the flexibility to decide what they think is appropriate. So if they chose to start small and then scale up, they could definitely do that. So it would be hard to put a fixed dollar figure on it. We know there have been times in the past that LMC looks at these issues and comes back with what they think is appropriate.
Okay. Thanks for now, Chair.
You're very welcome.
I'll ask a question later.
Minister of Environment, Energy, and Climate Change.
Thank you. So we have a number of amendments to make. I think we have 32, but we've worked with I've done nothing, but today's when the work starts for me, but I know you guys have worked really hard with the smart people in my department to figure some of this stuff out. So if you don't mind, I think we'll go through them like one by one. We probably won't get them all done today.
Sure.
So the first one is amendment to Section 1. And I'll read, and I believe that has them.
Honourable member, I guess there are copies made for each amendment, and they'll be passed out to all members. Okay.
Do you want me to read it now, or?
Yes, you go ahead.
So it's moved that Section 1 of the bill, number 108, is amended, and A, in Clause E, by the deletion of the words "any document" and substitution of the words "a prescribed document." B, in subclause H2, by the deletion of the words "is subject to restrictive covenants" and the substitution of the words "is a publicly owned property that is subject to a restrictive covenants." And C, in Clause K, by the deletion of the words "his or her" with substitution of the words "the persons." And D, in Clause 1, by the deletions of the words "any construction," substitution of the words "a prescribed construction." So the amendments will help clarify each item's both instruments and undertakings will need to go to environmental registry. It also removes private land designation under NAPA as being called public land, and the third amendment clause removes gender language.
Okay, thank you very much. Promoter, would you like to respond before I open it up to other debate?
Yeah, I can just say that we did have this discussion with the department and we have agreed to this amendment. I'm comfortable with it. It just clarifies very specifically what's in scope.
Okay. Is there any further debate on this amendment? No. Shall the amendment carry? Carry. Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change.
Thank you, Chair. So the next one is House Amendment Clause 1F. And Emily has a copy of those to it. So it's move that Bill number 108 is amended in Clause 1F and in the subsequent provisions of the bill by the deletion of the words minister wherever it occurs and the substitution of the word minister. It's just capitalization.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. Promoter, do you have any? Okay. Is there any questions on this amendment? Shall the amendment carry? Carry. Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change.
Thank you. So obviously these are lawyers' things. This isn't stuff that I've come up with, so everybody knows that I'm not this nitpicky. Yeah, that was me. The capital M was me. So this House amendment, it's new section 2.1. So it's moved that Bill number 108 is amended by the addition of the following after section 2.1, rights of the resident. This act guarantees the rights of the residents set out in is subject to reasonable limits prescribed by the law and can be demonstratively justified in a free and democratic society. So this clause has been added to remain consistent with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, basically.
Okay. Is there any debate on this amendment? Shall the amendment carry? Carry. Okay, well, we'll wait until you see it. No, we'll wait until you see it.
I think we need a full hour to do this. I'm not a fast reader.
Are there any questions on this amendment? Shall it carry? Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change.
Okay, so this one is House Amendment Clause 2.3a. Okay, and it's moved that Clause 2.3a of Bill 108 is amended by the deletion of the words environmental law and substitute with the words environmental rights. And it's amended to reflect that this bill establishes environmental rights for PEI rather than environmental law. The law has already been established in such areas as Environmental Protection, Water Act, and Common Law, etc.
Thank you very much, and it is presently being passed out. Members, so I'll give you a moment to receive it and to look it over and okay, are there any questions on this amendment? Shall it carry? Carry. Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change.
Thank you, Chair. So this is House Amendment Section 6. So Section 6, move that 1, Section 6 of Bill 108 is amended by the addition of the following subsection 2, notice of regulations under the Act. 3, where the minister responsible for the administration of this Act is considering a proposal for a regulation under this Act, the minister shall give notice of the proposal to the public at least 30 days before the proposal is implemented. So it basically requires the minister to give notice of 30 days for any changes to regs.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any questions on this amendment? Charlottetown Belvedere.
One quick question regarding notice of the proposal to public. Is there a standard process that notice is given under regulations?
Can you say that one more time, member?
Sure. Is there a standard practice of how notice is given to the public? Like,
Oh, yes, absolutely. So how notice is given under this act, it would all show up on the registry.
Okay.
So there will be a registry that's maintained by the commissioner, and that's where notice will be of any changes or any projects coming forward.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
no, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shall amendment carry?
Carry.
Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change.
Okay, so this one is House Amendment Section 26. Okay, so it says, move that Bill number 108 is amended in Section 26 by the deletion of the word shall and substitute it with the words may.
So you're missing something?
Make sure my notes.
You're missing something. Want them? Okay. We have a request for some members who haven't received a copy of all the amendments. So those who don't have copies of all the amendments so far and who wish to have them, can you just indicate to the clerk, please?
Notes are all up upon here.
You want a copy? Sure. So while we're passing this out, I do have a question from the Minister of Seniors and Public Housing.
Social development and housing.
Social Development and Housing.
Seniors are there, though.
Yeah.
Yes, so sponsor, I mean, 32 amendments is a lot of amendments, and it's great to see that, you know, your team worked with the Department of Environment to do this, but I mean, just ask the obvious question, why didn't you just pull the bill, make the amendments, and then bring it back to the floor so we could just review the final version of the bill instead of having the minister make 32 amendments?
Well, thank you for asking, Minister. I will tell you, we had provided this bill to the department about a month prior, and it takes some time to go through it. Most of the amendments that are being made are small. We're rewording things or making small changes. Frankly, the amount of time it would take to send it back to be redrafted would be substantive, so we worked very collaboratively with this office. We went through a ton of amendments, and this is where we have landed at.
Thank you very much, Promoter. At this time, I think 3:10 is scheduled to go to transition over to third-party time. So we will end here, but so the last amendment is still on the floor for debate.
Next time. Just say it if you want. Yeah. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report progress.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
Thank you.
That's okay.
She is.
Chair, I move that the Speaker take the chair and the chair report progress and beg leave to sit again.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the whole House, having under consideration a bill to be intituled, I need to go grab it again, Environmental Bill of Rights, I beg leave to report the committee has made some progress and begs leave to sit again. I move the report of the committee be adopted.
So carried. Honourable member from Tignish Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill to be intituled An Act to Amend the Election Act, and I move, seconded by the Leader of the Opposition, that the same be now received and read a first time.
So carry.
Bill number 113, an act to amend the Election Act, read a first time.
The honourable member from Tignish Palmer, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amending bill modernizes the Election Act and ensures that the Chief Electoral Officer has the authority and flexibility to deal with unforeseen circumstances before and during an election.
The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, third party House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by O'Leary and Verness, that the order number 22 of the day be now read.
So carried.
Order number 22, Broadband is an Essential Service Act, Bill number 105, in committee.
The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, third party House Leader.
I move, seconded by O'Leary and Verness, that this House do now resolve itself into committee of the whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
So carried. The honourable member from Charlottetown Belvedere, the chair of the committee of the whole House, please.
House is now in the committee of the whole House to be taken into consideration a bill to entitle broadband as an essential service. We had last had the bill on the floor. It had been amended, and we were in debate of the bill as amended. I understand there are some amendments to the bill to be tabled, which the clerks have. Did we want to start with amendments, or Promoter, did you want to start with?
No, we go right into amendments.
Okay. I'm hearing something. No? Okay. Okay. So I believe the Leader of the Official Opposition, if you would like to take the floor and you have your amendments to bring forward.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mover, for bringing this bill back to the floor. I hope that this will not take long today to pass this bill. And I think the concerns that are reflected in the series of amendments I brought forward were all sort of fairly thoroughly discussed in the previous times where this bill has made it to the Committee of the Whole. I have 4 amendments in total, and just before I present them, I want to reference something that Mermaid Stratford said in her member statement this morning when she brought forward the fact that she will be bringing an amendment to the Land Protection Act, and she said, our job here is to make legislation better and to benefit islanders. And I just wanted to reiterate that in saying that the amendments I'm bringing forward here, I hope that Mover of the bill will consider them ways that we can strengthen this legislation and make it better for the benefit of islanders. And they, again, circle around a number of issues that I've already discussed and expressed my concerns about regarding the original version of the bill. So I will go ahead and read my first amendment then, which is relevant to Section 1. And this is around the definition of a resident. The Honourable Member and myself had a discussion on this, I think the first day that this bill came to the floor, the fact that resident is not actually defined in this bill, and that a resident has a number of different definitions depending on where you look for it in legislation on PEI. So my first amendment is that I move that Section 1 of Bill 105 be amended by the addition of the following after Clause B, and this would be Clause B1. A resident means a person legally entitled to remain in Canada and who makes his or her home in and is ordinarily present in Prince Edward Island, but does not include a tourist, a visitor to the province, a member of the Canadian Armed Forces ordinarily resident in another jurisdiction, or a student or ordinarily resident in another jurisdiction. Again, this essentially what I'm saying here is that PEI must be your primary residence in order for this bill to be applicable.
Has everybody got a copy of that amendment?
Yes.
Yeah. Are there any questions? Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to bring a point up, Honourable Member, and with no disrespect, but I didn't receive any of these amendments until 11 minutes after 1, which for me, that is a big component of rolling this internet out across the province. I felt it quite overwhelming. Now I'm texting back and forth to the department, going through everything to try and see if we can support them or not. So I realize this was probably a last minute thing or possibly forgot, but I would have loved to hit these earlier just because it's so important, right? And I want to make sure exactly what you said is that we get the legislation right. I do have some concerns. I'll be honest, I only thought there was 3. The message I got, there was only 3 amendments sent to me, so I haven't even seen the 4th amendment. I'm not sure what that one is, so I might need a little more time on that, but we've only received 3 amendments so far. But on the first one, so I guess my question, why are we classing as residents? Because the way we're rolling out the internet is to homes, to residential homes, not people. We're going by civic addresses, right? So my question, why would the legislation have resident and not residences?
Okay, Mover of the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Maybe that's a better question for the mover of the bill, because really all of this did was to define the word resident, which was already in the Act, rather than residence. I wanted to make sure that the amendments I brought forward, and first of all, may I acknowledge that you're absolutely right, Minister, and I offer an apology for not giving you more notice. We have been going back and forward with Parliamentary Council for the last 2 or 3 days on this. But that process took until this morning to conclude. So I apologize for that. I apologize to the mover of the bill. I apologize to you, Minister, and the House for the fact that these amendments were not ready in a more timely manner. But that's the reason. I didn't want any of these amendments to alter, of course, the intent of the legislation. It was really just to clarify a few things and to strengthen them so that islanders can actually hold government to account on what this bill intends to do.
Thank you.
Take Ms. Palmer Road.
Thank you, Chair. And I think during that discussion, I was asked what my definition of a resident was. And at that time, I basically said anybody that is on Prince Edward Island, that lives here on Prince Edward Island, that has a home here on Prince Edward Island, which also included our seasonal residents. So I thought that was quite clear with that. I mean, this amendment does give definition to resident, but it's to, as the Minister had mentioned, specifically to a person and not to a residence, which was what the intent was originally with the bill.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
So there are many laws and rights that apply to people whose primary residence is Prince Edward Island, but do not apply to seasonal residents or part-time residents or tourists for that matter. So I guess I was just trying to make sure that the provisions of this bill and the responsibilities that government is going to be held to in terms of providing services to residents was clear, and that if there is the example I use, I'm not sure. I think you were present when this was said, Minister. I gave the example of the fact that many seasonal residents live in the most remote parts of our province, and if the bill is going to mandate government to provide the most up-to-date CRT standards to the most remote residences in the island for somebody who may only be here for a couple of weeks of the year, I felt that could possibly incur some very substantial costs to government. So that's why I wanted to limit this to full-time, not full-time, but people whose primary residence is here on Prince Edward Island.
Sure. Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Chair. So certainly that's a valid point. I guess where my head goes, and we've all had calls, so we've seen residents, island residents, now that possibly have built a home or down a seasonal road. So even though it's not government maintained or government owned, they are a resident of Prince Edward Island and they still pay taxes here and they still live here. And we all have roads like that in the district. So it's going to be a challenge to get to some of them. And I don't know if there's something in legislation that's going to be able to have one fix all of it. I certainly understand what you mean by tourists or people coming for a couple of weeks at a time. But I know even some of the messages coming in is that we are residents of Prince Edward Island, we blow our own snow, we live down a seasonal road that's not maintained by government, and we don't want to get cut off from no internet because of that, right? And it's a valid point because they contribute to taxes here in Prince Edward Island, and even though it's not a government road, it's still a responsibility to provide the infrastructure. So part of me, not that, like I say, we're doing this on the fly, and I'm texting back and forth to the department to see if this is going to interfere with us in any way. And I'll be honest, I would really love to have that Stantec report back, that I could see how many of these roads that would fall under and give a better idea of what it would look like. So that's my only concern with that, is I don't think it causes any problems with the bill. I don't see it. I'm just not sure if it offers anything either. So I'm, like you say, corresponding back and forth with the department now, and I'm getting them to do some homework here, and as soon as I have a little more info, I'll back on the list.
Okay. I have the Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question with this, following on what the Minister of the Department says, but I've got a concern with your definition in that does not include a member of the Canadian Armed Forces ordinary resident of another jurisdiction, which raises the question, what happens if you're a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, a member of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, or a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and get posted immediately to the province of Prince Edward Island? You're automatically, in other parts of the law, in other acts and regulations, you're automatically a resident if you are a member of one of them 3 organizations. And now you're excluding them, by your definition, if this passes within this bill. Can we answer that?
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you.
You're just waiting for
I should say this is not a definition that we created. This was from an existing piece of legislation here on Prince Edward Island. I wish I could, I don't have that at my fingertips, but hopefully I will do by the time I've answered this question. A couple of things about the Minister's response a minute ago, Chair. The first is that the Minister is already committed by the end of June 2023 to providing 100% coverage, not just 95% as this bill mandated, but 100% coverage across the island. So I think that the government has already committed more than this bill was actually mandating government to do. And the second thing is that by introducing this definition of what a resident is, we're actually limiting government's liability. I'm not, if you are, if PEI is your ordinary resident, if you're a full-time resident here, then that's what resident means. Currently, the resident is undefined in the bill, which to me opens government up to liabilities that may not be reasonable. So in bringing forward this amendment, it actually narrows down for government the people who would have to be covered, and they are residents of Prince Edward Island, not people who come here for vacations or are not full-time residents. So I'm trying to find out for the Minister of Fisheries and Communities exactly. It's from the Environmental Bill of Rights, actually, that we have on the floor at the moment.
Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Thanks, Chair. I don't have this typed up or ready to go, but I'd like to propose an amendment that to this amendment be one that a member of the Canadian Armed Forces be excluded, or any reference to a member of, or any application that could have to a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, or a member of a federal department of the Government of Canada.
Member, Minister, you're proposing an amendment to the amendment? Are you proposing just to remove the reference to the Canadian Armed Forces? Would that be sufficient?
Yes, Chair. I'm proposing that we remove a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, but also specify in there that does not apply to any member of the Government of Canada posted to the province of Prince Edward Island in the performance of its duties.
Member, do you have that amendment?
No, I don't. Because we're just getting these amendments now. I have not prepared for that.
Chair. Okay, hang on a second. We'll just take a quick recess on this one. Okay, so for that brief recess, just needed to advise that if there's an amendment being proposed on the floor, then we're going to need to get that amendment, have it written up, make copies, and have them recirculated, and then we can discuss that amendment to the amendment. Did we want to proceed with a debate on another aspect of this amendment whilst we're waiting for that amendment to come forward? Would that be satisfactory, Minister? Okay.
Chair, another thing could we do?
Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Chair. Could we also get a copy of all 4 amendments? I'm still missing that 4th amendment, just to give us a few minutes to go over.
I'll email it to you right now, Minister.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think we've got 2 actions on the floor at the moment. One of them is an amendment to the amendment, which the clerks need to deal with. And then as soon as they're able, we'll get the additional amendments circulated over to Nish Palmer Road. Would that be satisfactory to have all of the amendments tabled?
I would like to deal with one at a time.
Okay, all right, then we will, you will have that email to you, Minister of Economic Growth, and in the meantime, we'll deal with the amendment on the floor. do we need to recess again, or can we proceed with debate? Okay. So the amendment remains on the floor while we're waiting for that amendment to the amendment. So it's currently this amendment to the definition of resident in section 1 of Bill 105 as moved by the Leader of the Official Opposition. Does anybody else wish to speak to the amendment as it currently is presented?
Yes.
Tignish Palmer Road.
I have some questions about it, and again, it's putting the word resident attached to an individual. What about tourist businesses that we have all across the island and other businesses? And this is one of the things that I've said many, many times. The last 2 times I've sat on the floor of this House. I said it during question period. I said it during my statements. I've said it to other organizations that I spoke to, that this pandemic has accelerated the transition to online operations for businesses across Prince Edward Island. So businesses are scattered throughout, and we have some great businesses that are in all parts of Prince Edward Island. Are they going to be excluded from this bill?
Okay. Leader of the Official Opposition.
The answer to that is it depends. If this is a business owned by a resident of Prince Edward Island, clearly not. But your bill as it stands, all I'm doing here is clarifying, I'm sorry, I have a mask on, is clarifying what resident means in this bill. If the bill as it stands actually does not make that clear, member, I could ask the same question of you regarding the original version of this bill, because it is not clear. I'm trying to clarify things with these amendments, a series of amendments. I'm not, I should also say I'm not real stuck on this. If you want to have a bill that does not define the word resident, then that's fine. It looks to me like sloppy work, I have to tell you, not defining something as core. Yeah, something as core as a word resident, but I'm okay with us going ahead with that.
Hey, Chair. First of all, I would definitely not call any of the work that our Legislative Council does sloppy work. And that's basically what you just said. You said this legislation was sloppy work, so basically you're saying the Legislative Council who worked on this, who worked on your legislation too, and who worked on these amendments that you pushed at them in the last week, which they were told us they were swamped, but no, you took advantage of your little, I don't know what it is that you have, this high almighty attitude that you have, and to come in here and the gall of you to say that they do sloppy work, but yet you're at their door every day looking for something. So
I have a point of order. Mermaid Stratford.
I have a point of order, Chair, that in this Legislative Assembly, we talk about the work that we're working on and not discuss personal attacks, I'll call that, with members in the House. So I'm uncomfortable with the language that we're hearing and the attacks that we're hearing on the member.
So point of order on parliamentary language?
Yes.
Okay, so I have, take a brief recess for a moment, please. And we're back in the committee. Members, on the point of order raised in the committee, remind members that when they raise a point of order, they need to state what rule they're referencing, and we don't find that there's any specific instance in this case, but we do remind members that during debate, we should have a respectful debate. We should ensure that we follow the rules of the House in terms of ceding the floor, and we should be trying as much as possible to stay on the topic of debate, so that we can continue to move things forward. So thank you, and we'll proceed with the debate on the amendment, and then proceed to the amendment after that. Tignish Palmer Road.
Thank you very much, and I'm just going to add to that. That point of order that was brought up, I was speaking about the amendments to this bill that we have on the floor of the House right now. So I would maybe remind members to maybe follow what we're doing, and before they jump up and do a point of order, that I was speaking about amendments regarding this bill.
I'd remind you that I'm the chair of the committee right now, so I'm the one that makes that decision.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry to
Thank you, Chair.
We were taking turns.
Yeah.
If you could proceed with your discussion on the amendment, that would be great. Thank you, Tignish Palmer Road.
You're very welcome. So the leader of the leader of the opposition keeps putting it back to me about this definition of resident, and he brought this amendment forward. So if he can't answer what the meaning of resident is, then I'm not sure why he even put this amendment on the floor. It just seems to be he rose in the House today and talked about stalling. Well, to me, this is just another one of his stubborn attempts to prevent passage of a very constructive bill, and I think that's quite incredible that he's doing that. In fact, if the leader of the opposition is engaged in, I think he's engaged in a new type of partisanship, and as you all know, like if you don't agree with the Green Party, you're morally wrong. So, and this kind of partisanship is very, very dangerous, Madam Chair. So I think he's drawn party lines. I put this bill on the floor. He talked about it and talked about it and talked about it, did nothing about it. Now he's scratching at it to try to put a little bit of green color into it. And Islanders are coming to me, people from his district are coming to me and saying, what is wrong? What is going on? Why is this bill not passed? It's very important. We want to have a reliable access to internet, and we want to make sure that it comes to our home. We want to make sure that we have access to it. I mentioned earlier about the pandemic just accelerating everything to online, Madam Chair. So I don't understand how a resident, and the meaning of resident, does not include tourist businesses, and even more importantly, just businesses in general, because businesses are the backbone of Prince Edward Island, whether it be mom and pop shops or a larger business. It's 2021. They need access to reliable internet service, and it can't be attached to an individual. It needs to be attached to all residents of Prince Edward Island, and I would include in that seasonal residents who come here and operate seasonal businesses during the summer, during the winter, whatever it might be. So anyway, I think this amendment does not clearly take in all the people of Prince Edward Island and their needs to have a reliable internet service, whether it be at their home or at their place of business.
Thank you. Minister of Fisheries and Communities, do you have your amendment to the amendment ready to go?
Thank you, Chair. At this time, I'm not going to bring forth the amendment. However, I will be voting against this amendment that's been put toward the bill.
Okay. So we remain with the amendment as presented by the Leader of the Official Opposition. Do I have anyone else wishing to speak to this amendment? Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'll just close off this amendment by saying I don't know if it's a good fit or if it's not, I'll be honest. I'm sitting here trying to text back and forth to my department. I'm getting different answers. I'm not comfortable supporting it without knowing how it looks like. And this isn't picking on you in any way, Honourable Member. I know sometimes I'm as guilty as anybody to make amendments up and not give them quick enough. This one here, for me, making sure Prince Edward Island and all Islanders get internet is the #1 priority for me since I've taken this portfolio. It's a challenge. We've been making strides, and I want to make sure we certainly do it right. So I can't say as I'm opposed to the amendment. I just, at this time, to vote on it, I don't have the answer whether it's a good fit or not. So at this point, I'm going to have to say I won't be supporting the amendment, but not saying that we won't in the future if this comes back and I can get a straight answer here.
Chair?
Tignish Palmer Road.
I also will not be supporting this amendment as it does not include businesses that are so important to the economy of Prince Edward Island.
Leader of the third party.
So, just for clarity, like, anyone that was born in Canada is a citizen of Canada, correct? So if you're born a PEI, you're a citizen of the country. Is that correct?
Tignish Palmer Road.
I'm not sure. I'm sure if you were born here, then you're a resident of Prince Edward Island and a citizen of Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I just like to say I'll not be supporting this amendment either. Thank you.
Leader of the official opposition.
Thanks. When I think back to when I first sat in this House and amendments to bills were brought forward, they were quite literally scratched on a piece of paper and handed to the clerks. And, you know, it was rather chaotic. It was difficult to follow. And we've come leaps and bounds since then. I've already apologized for the late arrival of these amendments, and I want to reiterate that. But we sit in this legislature, and we're the only 27 people on Prince Edward Island who can make laws for this jurisdiction, and we need to do a good job. We need to produce high-quality laws, the best that they can be, and we need to be precise when we do that, because a misplaced comma even, or the change of one single word can alter the intent of a piece of legislation. So we need to be picky. I want to reiterate that I want to pass this bill. I'm not trying to be obstructive here. I'm trying to be constructive by bringing forward amendments that will bring clarity to this bill so there is as little ambiguity as possible, which is why I wanted to bring forward all of these amendments. This is not changing in any way the ability for any business on Prince Edward Island to receive this. Your original bill did not define this, and therefore it was open to interpretation. So I want to be absolutely clear. I want this bill to pass. I want government to bring forward true high-quality internet to all islanders, wherever you live. And I want that to be available to seasonal residents too, and all business owners, regardless. And government has committed to that. Government has committed to 100% of residences on PEI by 2023 will have high-speed internet as defined by CRTC. I'm really trying here just to create some clarification in a bill which lacked clarification. And if the member doesn't appreciate that, that's okay, but that's all I'm trying to do here.
Is there any further comment or debate on this amendment as presented? Okay, all those in favour of the amendment as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against the amendment as presented, please indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The nays have it. The amendment is defeated. Okay, returning to the bill as presented, I understand that there's additional amendments to come forward. Is that on the same section? Is this coming from the Leader of the Official Opposition?
Yes, second amendment on the same section, section 1. Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
and the clerk has copies. Do you have a copy that you could read into the record while those are being distributed?
Sure, I'll do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I move that Clause 1, Sub A of Bill 105 is deleted and the following substituted. A, high-speed internet means internet service, subsection 1, with download speeds of 50 megabits per second or faster, and upload speeds of 10 megabits per second or faster. Sub 2, that meets any additional targets, criteria, or standards established by the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission from time to time in relation to internet services. And Sub 3, that meets any additional standards that the Minister may establish that are consistent with or exceed those under subclauses 1 and 2. And Chair, by means of explanation, the original bill defines high-speed internet as 50 down and 10 up. And that's fine for today. Again, we had this discussion before. My concern about that is that those yardsticks are going to move, and 50-10 today may seem like a reasonable standard to meet, but CRTC is continuously updating what they consider to be guidelines for reasonable internet service. So with this provision, we allow this bill to remain relevant in years to come. As it's currently written, it would be out of date by the time likely out of date. It's impossible to say, but it would likely be out of date by the time the end of the legislation, the enforcement period for the legislation would pass. So this is a way of making this piece of legislation evergreen, so that as CRTC raises its standards, and those 50-10 current targets are a 5-year-old target, and I think it's safe to say that they will increase. So again, this is meant to strengthen the bill and make sure that islanders are serviced not with something which is okay today but may not be okay 2 or 3 years from now, but will always be up to CRTC standards, excuse me.
Thank you. Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to thank the member for bringing this amendment. As somebody who's worked in telecommunications for a very long time, I can tell you how quickly speeds go out of date. I can speak from when I worked at Bell delivering internet services. We would never actually put information in print because that's how fast it moves. So I mean, if you look back to what the internet speeds were in the late 1990s, high-speed internet would be, basically 800 megabytes per second plus, if you were lucky, and that was the standard. And then you moved into the 2000s when we launched fiber op, for instance, that set a new standard. And then we saw cable come forward that set a new standard. Anyway, so I understand exactly how quickly infrastructure and speeds can change within telecommunications, and in that space, it does take the CRTC, I'm going to say a space of time to make decisions and to increase it, but they're constantly being lobbied, so that number can change at any point in time. So if we are able to move in lockstep with the CRTC instead of having it prescribed in the legislation, then I think that would be a healthy thing for us to do, just knowing historically how quickly the speeds can move. That's all, Chair. I didn't have a question. I just wanted to make a comment from my experience.
Thank you. Thank you, Mermaid Stratford. Leader of the third party.
Thanks, Chair. So the amendment, just for clarity, did I hear the Honourable Leader of the Opposition say 50 up and 50 down? No, what did he say?
And 10 up. Sorry, Chair.
So basically the same as what's in the bill, under A.
Leader of the third party, will you respond? To clarify? Sorry, Leader of the Official Opposition. Oh no, I'm getting mixed up. Did you want to respond to the Leader of the third party to clarify the question?
I do. You've brought up the exact problem with the bill in its original form, which is that 5010 is what's in there with no provision to update that in the future. This amendment allows speeds to be updated as CRTC amends their guidelines as time goes by.
Leader of the third party, you're good? Okay. Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Chair. So one concern I have, and I guess I'll try and explain the best I can with being a minister for this portfolio. So people feel that you can just hit a switch and we have high-speed internet, and that's not the case. You look, 2 years have gone now with working on infrastructure. It takes years and years and years to put infrastructure, and that's why it's going to get us to 2023, is because it can't happen overnight. And I wish there was a way to speed the process up. But my concern or question here, and just guide me through this. So all our internet contracts now that we have with Bell ExploreNet are with the 5010. So it's going to take till 2023 to hit this. What happens if CRTC rolls out a different number on 2023? So all the work we've done pre-hand with the 5010 is gone out the window, and we're starting this whole process over that takes years to get to. It's not just a matter of flicking a switch and throwing a few dollars. It's complete infrastructure, and the problem is every other province is also competing to get this infrastructure into, right? I know even some of the projects we're working on, doesn't matter if it's Eastlink, Bell, ExploreNet, they're looking at 6-8 months for some of these other secondary roads, right? It's not an easy fix. So I'm curious to see what that looks like if we were to go with a generic standard, and that does happen. What's the expectations of a government of the day to have to start out and roll millions and millions and millions more dollars in infrastructure? That just doesn't happen that fast.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate the question, Minister, and there are two things I would say in response to that. One is that the infrastructure we're putting in now is replacing, to a large extent, very archaic infrastructure, copper lines and stuff like that, and that infrastructure, in order to comply with changes in CRTC guidelines, wouldn't necessarily have to be replaced. Infrastructure is upgradable. And once you have fiber, for example, you can put 5010 or you can put 1500 or whatever you wish on it. So this would not necessitate a complete rebuild of infrastructure every time CRTC comes up with new guidelines. If that's our response, then we're doing a really bad job of installing infrastructure, because it has to be upgradable. The second thing is that the original bill, and the mover would know this, has provision for 5 years in order for government to meet any new standards that come along. So there's two things there, I guess, that the infrastructure itself is not necessarily redundant when CRTC comes through with new guidelines, and the second thing is that government in the bill itself has 5 years to comply with any new standards. So I think that would overcome the concerns the very legitimate concerns you just brought up.
Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess just one more question. I'm sure it's not going to happen, but just with the so what happens? We've got contracts now in place for the 5010, and CRTC comes out with something in a year's time. So our contracts would then become null and void, and we'd be starting the process again. Am I right in saying that? Because the contracts that we have now are to a 5010. So what would that? I'm sure it's not going to happen, but if it ever did, what does that look like?
Leader of the Official Opposition.
As I understand it, Minister, and I'm not an expert on the agreements themselves nor on this part of law, but that those agreements are independent of CRTC standards, and that those commitments present in those agreements would be still absolutely applicable. And again, the 5-year window in order for government to comply with any changes to CRTC guidelines would allow you, at the end of those contracts, to upgrade to whatever the new CRTC standards are within 5 years. And none of the contracts that we have currently between either government and Bell or government and ExploreNet extend beyond those not even close to those 5-year windows.
Okay. Leader of the Third Party.
Question for the Minister, if I can.
If he's okay. Intervention from the Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
I don't profess to know everything there is about this, but could you not exceed the 510?
Oh, certainly. In that,
why wouldn't there be a desire to do that? Is it the cost, in anticipation that you got some flex if it does go up in a year or in 2 years?
Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
yeah, certainly. So I think cost is definitely part of it. And I look back. Internet has been an issue here for the last 20 years, right? And times have changed and so forth. We, as a province, were in a real good place back in, I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s, when government put their own fiber infrastructure into the province here. And for whatever reason at the time, I believe it was sold in 2007 at the time. But, having a piece of infrastructure early on put us ahead of most provinces. But now we've had to start from scratch. And like I say, the more, I don't confess to knowing anything much about internet either. This has been a learn for me as I've gone, but I've certainly seen how the priority of it and how much we need, and I want to make sure that once and for all islanders do get it. So when we worked with these contracts, that's exactly what it was. There was so much money in the pot. The feds with the CRTC numbers, that's how this has all worked out, right? And I do feel the 5010 is going to be around for a while. I do know technology changes all the time. But at the same time, to go and start, this is where I'm having the problem with this bill. I want to support the bill, I do, because it is an essential service. We do need internet, and I want to make sure we get it right. But at the same time, I'm doing everything I can not to jeopardize all the good work we've done through the department and jeopardize the contracts with ExploreNet and Bell, because I know it's easy for me to say behind the scenes because I'm there, but we've made inroads on internet in this last 12 to 14 months. Like, we're in the vicinity after the end of May here. We're going to be over 30,000 Islanders have been hooked up to good internet, right? So that's where I'm really concerned with how, I don't want it to reflect on the contracts and the deal that we already have done, because I want to make sure that Bell and ExploreNet, we hold them to account, and I want to make sure that Islanders do get high-speed internet once and for all, so.
Okay. Leader of the third party.
So in light of your comments, Minister, I commend the promoter of this bill. If you think 5010 is going to be around for a while, and the people that wrote this bill up obviously would have suggested otherwise to the promoter, so this seems like a good fit for this bill. Thank you.
Okay. Should I take this? Okay, so.
If I could add, like
Sure.
the discussion that's going on right now, both the bill and both the amendment both say 50 megabits per second or faster, and upload speeds of 10 megabits per second or faster. So it's already saying in here, in both the bill and the amendment, that if something else comes along that's faster, that's where we're going to go. So.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Tignish Palmer Road.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I just have a question for the minister, the mover of the amendment, and that was there any consultation with CRTV to see if there's any anticipation of those standards being raised in the near future?
Leader of the official opposition.
I would say as much consultation as you did with CRTC.
So, okay.
Okay, Tignish Palmer
So
Road.
I would like to know what the mover had with the conversation with CRTV.
Leader of the official opposition.
I believe in a previous exchange on the floor here, I asked whether the mover had spoken to anybody with CRTC, and he said no, but maybe I either misheard or I'm not remembering correctly. It's, for me, it's a little alarming that I want this bill to pass, the minister wants this bill to pass, clearly the mover wants this bill to pass, and the amendments I'm bringing forward are, again, to quote Mermaid Stratford from earlier today, to make this bill better for Islanders. And currently, government is actually committed to more than this bill mandates government to do, and that's a real problem for me. We need a bill that holds government to account in a way that it is not committed to at the moment, and my amendments are trying to do that, to strengthen this bill, to make it better so that Islanders are better served in the future.
Yeah, I am well aware of the time. Thank you. I'd like to advise the House that we are now at the point of changing over to government time. Thank you to the move of the bill, and the committee is now adjourned. And it's the, where is it? No, not that one. This one, right? There we go. Have you got your thing? Yeah, I know. Do you want me to get it for you? There you go.
Yeah, please. Just to make sure. Okay. Madam Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report progress and beg leave to sit again.
Okay, shall I carry? Carry. Thank you. chair of the Committee of the Whole House, having had under consideration the Daughtry and Tishore Broadband as an Essential Service Act, I beg leave to report that the committee has made some progress and begs leave to sit again. I move that the report of the committee be adopted.
So carried. The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice and Public Safety and Attorney General that the first order of the day be now read.
So carried.
Order number 1, consideration of the estimates in committee.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, Public Safety and Attorney General that this House do now resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration grant of supply to Her Majesty.
So carried. The Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker, Chair of the Committee of the Whole House, please.
The House is now in a committee of the whole House to consider the grant of supply to Her Majesty. A request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Honourable members, we are on Health PEI, page 100. Good afternoon. Would you please state your name and position for Hansard?
Kelly Hawes, Chief Financial Officer with Health PEI.
Thank you very much, Kelly, and welcome.
Thank you.
Corporate Services. Appropriations provided for operation of the Office of the Chief Executive Officer and for the provision of corporate services in the areas of risk management, planning and evaluation, policy development and analysis. This section supports the operation of Board of Health PEI, administration $86,600, equipment $14,000, materials supplies, services $29,500, professional services $322,000, salaries $2,148,400, travel and training $102,600, total corporate services $2,703,100. Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Chair. Professional services were, it looks like they were quite over budget last year, more than $100,000. Just wondering why that would be.
So when we look at professional services, that represents consulting fees for communication and supports for our mental health operations and capital budget, as well as consulting fees to support our QEH redevelopment project.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay. Are there reports from that consultant work, both of those different examples you just cited?
In relation to the consulting work for the QEH redevelopment, it was a forecasted line item, and we weren't able to move that forward due to COVID.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay. So you weren't. Are there plans to move it forward in the future, though? So can you elaborate a bit on what that was all about? What were the plans?
When we look at that consulting report, the objective would be to identify what the future would be for QEH redevelopment. For example, in the past, it would be a similar report whereby we were able to identify what improvements should be made to the hospital as it related to emergency services or ambulatory care.
Time Valley Sherbrooke?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Is that a report that could be tabled? I'd be curious to see that.
We don't have that available yet, as we did not move forward, but we certainly could consider that as that project moves forward and have that information available.
Time Valley Sherbrooke?
Yeah, definitely. With the understanding, of course, that you're not moving forward currently, it would be good to know what those recommendations were and, you know, for the future, so we know sort of where you're headed or where the recommendations would suggest you should head. So is that something that could be tabled, that could be shared?
Yes. In the future.
Time Valley
That project
Sherbrooke?
did not
Like
go forward.
now, not in the future? Just to clarify, I would like to see it now if possible.
I'm sorry, it's not available now as that project did not proceed. We hope to proceed with that project this current fiscal year.
Time Valley Sherbrooke?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to be a stickler on this. It would be really interesting to see the report anyway, just even though understandable, you can't move forward because of COVID, but to see what the recommendations are to, you know, make improvements at QEH. Is that a report that could be made public? So people know what the consultant came up with and
That is what the report will entail when that goes forward, because that is what that work would be, for a consultant to review and identify what the needs of that facility would be. We just simply don't have that available as of yet because that project did not proceed.
Okay.
Time Valley Sherbrooke?
So Cabinet just appointed, the most recent CEO to a new post in government. So there's an interim CEO. So I'm wondering, you know, the board's going to have to conduct a hiring process. So is that reflected, the additional cost of that in this section of the budget?
Within the professional and contract services within this area, there would be funding available to move forward with that.
Time Valley Sherbrooke?
That's fine, thank you.
Shall the section carry? Human Resources appropriations provided for the provision of leadership, assistance, and support to all divisions within Health PEI in the areas of human resource, policy and planning, staffing, labor relations, and occupational health and safety. The division also provides payroll services, French language services, and integrated disability management. Administration, $23,500. Equipment, $3,900. Material supplies and services, $1,100. Professional services, $814,700. Salaries, $4,200,200. Travel and training, $63,300. Grants, $930,000. Total human resources, $6,036,700. Time Valley Sherbrooke?
So the minister has stated in this House that there are human resource issues at the Prince County Hospital. Those are the minister's words, not my words. I had many other words about that. But I'm wondering if there will be any investment in a targeted HR support of some kind to take a critical look at what is actually happening at Prince County Hospital and provide recommendations and hopefully move toward some improvements to what we're hearing is, quite honestly, a toxic culture within that hospital.
I don't know if we want to use the word toxic culture there, Chair. I think yes, you look at human resources, and I have said it's something that we have to be very vigilant on as far as what the human resource requirements and needs throughout the healthcare system are as we move forward.
Time Valley Sherbrooke?
So the question is specifically about Prince County Hospital, and there's, you know, we're losing surgeons there. You know, there's something going on there that is resulting in people choosing to leave. Now, I am only suggesting that it would be prudent to have some sort of an HR expert support go into that hospital and actually take a look at what's going on there. So speak with, you know, we've talked about exit interviews or exit surveys. That's important, but engaging with the staff before they leave. There's clearly something going on there. So, you know, this would be a great opportunity to, you know, target some investment in looking at what those issues are. So is there any funding available, or would that be possible for some sort of targeted HR expert support to get in there and really start to look at what's going on, what are the problems, and start to address them?
I think, first of all, I would say is that absolutely it's something that I think could, maybe should be considered, but I don't think that we need to look particularly at one facility. The other thing that I would say too, though, is that with regard to the board, with regard to the corporate services management, that is something that management and the board, as like we've had the act that we collaborated on quite well, I would have to say. But I think the agreement, and part of the reason that amendment to the Health Services Act was brought forward by the member was to give as much autonomy in decision-making going forward to the board and to Health PEI as possible. But again, yes, I'd be open to that, personally.
Time Valley Sherbrooke.
And I think you will also remember from the very in-depth and detailed and long discussion that we had on that bill that it is, most certainly the responsibility of the minister to engage in regular discussion with the board and with leadership at Health PEI and to, collaborate with them. That this is, it takes work to do that. And as I, said then, and I will say now, it doesn't require you to have the ultimate power to make every decision to do that. So in this case, what I would like to know about is what will be done or what is going to be done to start to address the HR, and that was your language, the human resource issue that exists at Prince County Hospital. That's an open-ended question. So if you're not going to have an expert come in, you don't have plans for that, what are you going to do?
Well, I guess two comments that I would have here, Chair. Sure. First of all, is we are dealing with the budget in front of us. I do appreciate that the member of a question that she is bringing forward. I would also reiterate, though, that I am in regular conversation with the ELT team, with the CEO of Health PEI, and have regular meetings with the board chair and then with the full board as well. So will those discussions be taking place? Absolutely.
Time Valley Sherbrooke.
So it's great to hear that there are regular meetings happening. There absolutely should be. Am I to understand then that there's not been any discussions yet about how to start to, critically look at and address the HR issues that are happening at Prince County Hospital? Because this didn't just start last week. This is an ongoing problem that has snowballed into something where we're having people, surgeons who are choosing to leave. So that doesn't happen overnight. So those discussions haven't happened yet? Is that what you're saying?
What I've said is that there's continuous ongoing discussions with the executive leadership team and with the board chair on a number of items, and I'm going to leave it at that.
And Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay, so I'll just say one more thing on this. So if there is a desire to start to work toward restoring public confidence and start to, recognize and address the issues that are happening at Prince County Hospital, and this is going to be the last thing I say about this, I strongly recommend that these discussions need to happen right now. They should have been happening already. And there needs to be a plan that is then communicated to people very soon about, just even how you're going to start to address that. So here's my recommendation, have an HR expert get in there and start to look at what those issues are. If you have another plan, that's fine, but you need to communicate that, not a plan to make a plan. Like, you need to know how you're going to start to look at that. So I hope that we can start to get some real answers on that very, very soon. And I can tell you, I won't stop asking, and I'm sure that probably other members in the opposition also will not stop asking this because it's absolutely critical. That's all for
Leader
that
of the
section.
third party.
Thank you, Chair. So grants, education bursaries is $930,000. Been the same over the course of the last week. What does that all include?
Those represent grants to for our unions for collective agreements for health education funds. For UPSI, it's $310,000. For IUOE, it's $200,000. For PEIU and education, it is $400,000, and the QB Education Fund is $20,000.
Leader of third party.
So they're stated here as bursaries?
education funds, which would allow employees to apply
their skills.
for education to improve their skills.
Leader of the third party.
And then professional legal fees, it's quite a change from 209.8 to 22.1. What's the difference there? It took quite a hike.
So what I will say to you is that within corporate services, we have a vacant legal or solicitor position. So we have had to contract out for some legal services accordingly.
Leader of the third party.
That's it for now, thank you. Chair.
Welcome. Shall the section carry? Carry. Health informatics. Appropriations provided for the operation of health informatics and performance, including record information management, Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, health information, as well as coordination and strategic planning for health information and computer systems. Administration, $9,400. Equipment, $2,000. Material supplies and services, $800. Professional services, $103,900. Salaries, $1,705,400. Travel and training, $20,700. Total health informatics, $1,842,200. Time Valley, Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that in this section, salaries were quite underspent last year. Is this a trend? Or are there challenges filling positions in this area?
So last year, we had some temporary vacancies in relation to a director level position and 3 health information specialists, all of which the 3 information specialists are posted and if not filled at this point. There was a new position of a telemedicine coordinator, which is in the process of being filled as well. So they are temporary in nature.
Time Valley, Sherbrooke.
Okay, so can you tell me a bit about the telemedicine coordinator, that new position? Who will they be working with?
The telemedicine coordinator would be working with folks with our clinical information system, anything having to do with virtual care, to identify and make sure that individuals across our organization are aware of the approved systems that are available and how to use them. So simply put, a coordinator. And if I'm looking at this now, that really should be under the interoperative electronic health record, but yes, that's where it will be working.
Time Valley, Sherbrooke.
And so would that include the Maple virtual care service in any capacity, or specifically virtual care that existing physicians in PEI are using within their own practices?
They could provide support, and that support could be just showing them how to use that, how to access it, and to ensure individuals understand how to use that system accordingly.
Time Valley, Sherbrooke.
So individuals teaching them or showing them how to use the Maple system?
Or any virtual care or platform that we would have available for what we would consider telemedicine.
Okay, that's interesting. And so will this person also be working with physicians for them to enhance their skills and capacity in terms of using virtual care?
It could be possible, yes.
Time Valley, Sherbrooke.
So, okay, so we're not sure, how did you identify that this position was necessary then?
Reflecting upon telemedicine work that was happening at one of our primary facilities, it was identified that there was an individual that was required to help set up telemedicine that was maybe on site, and it was taking a significant amount of time and therefore taking away time from that work, maybe in medical records or other areas. So it was deemed necessary to have a position specific to setting up and establishing this and helping individuals utilize the systems.
Time Valley, Sherbrooke.
Okay, so that sounds more like supporting, setting up and supporting PEI physicians then, so, okay. I don't really, since we are paying a private company for Maple, I'm just making sure that we're not also hiring a coordinator to support people to use the Maple system. I would think that's part of the service that we are paying that private company for. So I just wanted to clarify what that's all about.
No, this is about our broader organization and ensuring people are supported when they're working on new platforms.
Okay, all right, that's all.
Efficient and effective.
Shall the section carry? Interoperative electronic health record. Appropriations provided for development, implementation, and support for the integrated electronic health record and virtual care. Administration, $42,000. Equipment, $22,700. Material supplies and services, $2,854,400. Professional services, $232,400. Salaries, $2,206,400. Travel and training, $51,400. Total interoperative electronic health record, $5,408,300. O'Leary and Verness?
This has always been a long-standing issue, certainly when I was minister too, the electronic medical records. Now, any idea when that's going to be actually implemented?
There has been a contract signed with TELUS Health, as I'm sure I've mentioned before here. As it is rolling out now, it should be up and going late this year, remember? So I'm anticipating into mid to late fall.
O'Leary and Verness?
So I'm going to just, on this budget, so would the creation of the electronic medical records be in this section, or is that a capital expenditure?
So if you're referring to the EMR, that at this present time is a capital budget, and that capital budget is with the Department of Health and Wellness, and there's no operating dollars as of yet for the EMR, as it's not yet slated to be operational.
Right.
O'Leary and Verness?
But I guess my only point would be, as the minister just stated, that it would be at the end of the year. This budget here is for the end of March 2022. So why wouldn't there be extra revenues in here for that operational component of the budget?
If I recall some of the discussions in relation to the Department of Health and Wellness, they identified values of revenue as it relates to Health Canada funding that was available, and some aspects of that would be looking at what supports are needed to stand up the EMR from an operational side.
O'Leary and Verness?
So then, for the next health PEI regular operational budget, then there will be more revenue or more costs put into it at that point? Is that what you're saying? That they're just kind of a startup costs that are coming from Canada Health Infoway? Or?
Mm-hmm. We will be planning for that.
O'Leary and Verness?
So when it came to the previous plan that was to put into it, and the minister said it wasn't kind of coming together, that the physicians were supportive of it, that's fair enough. What kind of money did we lose on that initiative?
I would have to bring that back as far as the details on that.
O'Leary and Verness?
So when did you pull the, or when did the department pull the plug, or Health PEI pull the plug on that version? Was that previous year or in the last fiscal year?
Again, I'll bring them back details on that.
Okay, no, I think
O'Leary and Verness?
that's fine, Chair.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke?
Thank you, Chair. So in relation to the TELUS EMR, will there be any additional services like purchased or bought into that are related to the EMR in any way?
I don't have that information here, as that project currently resides with the Department of Health and Wellness.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke?
Okay, that's interesting. Because, well, my question I really wanted to know about specifically was around virtual care. So the Babylon virtual care is what is associated with TELUS Health in other provinces. That is, I mean, it's not a capital expense, obviously, but I guess if you're telling me it's in the Department of Health and Wellness, I'm hoping you can still answer the question, because I did not realize that that was there when this is where the EMR is listed in the budget. But so I apologize for that. But my question is around, will we be switching over to the Babylon virtual care instead of Maple? Is there a plan to do that? Yeah, but this isn't capital.
We would have to bring that question back to the project manager responsible for this with the Department of Health and Wellness. We'd have to bring that back.
Okay.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke?
Okay. So yes, I do hope you bring that back. I just want to note that in other provinces, such as Alberta, there's actually been some pretty serious questions around protection of privacy with the Babylon app specifically, and that is the one that's tied to the TELUS EMR system that is implemented in that province. So I hope that we're not going to jump down that path without seriously looking into it. The Privacy Commissioner in Alberta is currently investigating that, so just a flag there that would not be perhaps something to do lightheartedly. So hopefully you can bring that information back.
Appreciate that, and we will bring it back.
That's all. Thank you.
Member Stratford.
Thank you, Chair, and I think my answer, I'm sorry, I don't think my question fits in this. It's probably more of a capital because of the EMR architecture, like, so what it looks like from end to end. Has that been fully developed? Are you aware?
It would be under a contract agreement with TELUS Health.
Member Stratford.
Sorry, I missed that. I'm just looking for my headphones. One sec. Can you repeat that, Minister?
I'm just saying it would be under the contract agreement with TELUS Health. You're referring, member, to the electronic medical records that will be rolled out across the whole province.
Member Stratford.
And as part of that rollout, so is there training, ongoing training in this section for frontline or anybody that's going to be trained? Or would that also be in the capital budget allocation?
There is no budget for the EMR in this budget as it sits right now, because that project, which is considered a capital right now, remains with the Department of Health and Wellness. But I do understand that there would be a significant training component, but there is currently no budget in this section for that.
Member Stratford.
I'm good, thanks, Chair.
Shall the section carry? Total corporate services, $15,990,300. Shall it carry? Carried. Financial services, appropriations provided for the administration and operation of financial accounting, auditing, materials management, financial reporting systems, financial planning and analysis. Administration, $998,700. Debt, $251,800. Equipment, $29,500. Material supplies and services, $128,100. Professional services, $215,900. Salary, $7,051,800. Travel and training, $60,300. Grants, $4,000. Total financial services, $8,740,100. O'Leary and Verness.
Just on the debt there, you're at a pretty high debt, and this is debt for people who owe fees to for like long-term care or to surgical issues that might be more cosmetic or things of that nature. Would that be correct?
So there's a higher allowance here due to a reduction in collection calls during COVID-19. So when we look at revenue within health PEI, it's approximately $22.3 million. This is an estimate of the value of a receivable that would be anticipated to be uncollectible. Right. And the concern that we may have on any of our accounts would be more for out-of-country visitors requiring emergency services.
Right.
O'Leary and Verness.
So could you just run that number that what is outstanding debt? So you're saying this is how much that you may have to write off.
It's simply an estimate of that.
O'Leary and Verness.
So what is the overall outstanding debt of people that owe the health PEI fund money for services? The total amount.
I don't have that value before me, but our revenues for, I'll just check on that, for fees and services are $22.3 million on average.
Okay, well, that gives you something to kind of go by.
Yeah.
O'Leary and Verness.
So basically, you didn't really go after any debt of that, or go after people that were in arrears last year. Is that correct?
We paused for a couple of months and weren't as, I'll say, maybe aggressive in those telephone calls, but we continue to make calls and seek reimbursement for those services. There's been no stoppage of that at all.
Right.
O'Leary and Verness.
So then, really, why the change? We're still in the pandemic, I guess, is what I'd be saying. Like, you know, I certainly would get maybe a little bit at the start, but we're still in the pandemic, so you've made a decision to go back after these people, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be. I'm just saying. So what sort of changed, or who made that decision?
To continue to collect the revenues. Well, it is a requirement, so it would have been our Department of Finance.
O'Leary and Verness.
Okay, no, I think that, just wanted to get a little bit of clarity on that. Thanks, Chair.
Shall the section carry? Carry. Total financial services, $8,740,100. Shall it carry? Carry. Medical affairs, general administration, appropriations provided for the administration of Health Services Payment Act and the development of partnerships between physicians and other collaborating professionals. This section is responsible for grants and physician supports per the Master Agreement and Medical Residency Program and other physician medical training programs. Administration, $71,000. Equipment, $8,800. Material supplies and services, $60,700. Professional services, $7,980,100. Salaries, $4,297,700. Travel and training, $104,600. Grants, $4,889,800. Total general administration, $17,412,700. Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Chair. In this section, the medical seats at Memorial is $800,000. Do we support the medical seats at Dow too?
Yes.
Okay, so why is that not in the section?
It is under professional contract services. When you look at Memorial, it is a grant to them, and when we look at Dalhousie, it's payment of salary, so it's a contractual arrangement.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Okay.
For those seats.
Yeah, so our seats are full at Memorial. Yeah, okay. There's another contract with Quebec. One seater, is it one seat in the Quebec, Trois-Rivières maybe, is that correct? Sherbrooke, yeah, yeah.
So my understanding is not through Health PEI, but perhaps an agreement with the province of New Brunswick and Quebec. I believe this may be funded through the Department of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Is that seat taken by an island resident?
I'm not sure.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
So, and in here too, the physician retention program, we heard in the speech from the throne that recruitment and retention is a major priority, but I see that the dollar amount there is stagnant from last year's budget. It's at $500,000. Is that a fixed monetary amount, or?
We could bring that information back.
Yeah, sorry about that. I do have that with me. I'm just, I'll put my finger on that.
That's all right.
We can bring that back, though.
Yes.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And just something small, like I see in there too, the medical student book allowance. Is that something, if we're trying to recruit these medical students back, I know there's $10,000 in that. It just seems like a simple way that we could augment that to add incentive. Would that be something the minister would look at?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Because I know it gets expensive for the doctors going to school, and that funding, I mean, they would get a piece of that, but it just seems like a simple way to put goodwill and faith on the returning end. That's it for me for now. I'll just come back.
So section care, O'Leary and Verness.
Just on a couple of on medical affairs here, you have your locum support program. So you've significantly tapped into that. You went well over budget last year, and you're kind of coming back in between for the coming year. So what was the reason for that? He asks knowingly.
So just for clarity, the question on why the increase in budget?
Yeah.
Okay. Just in looking at our forecasted value for the previous year, we identified that there was truly a need for additional supports for local support.
O'Leary and Verness.
So basically, you didn't have enough physicians to fill your normal complement, so you had to bring in more locums, right? Or locums for a longer period of time than anticipated. So do you feel like I say, as I've been going on about the numbers here, that 938,700 is going to be enough to keep your locum budget intact. You know, I'm just being realistic on your budget. I mean, you overshot it by quite a bit last year. I would be almost guessing that, just even based on the minister saying that there will be more physicians coming, I get that. But the chances of them coming in time for this fiscal year sounds like there would be a bit remote. So I would wonder why 938,700 is reasonable.
Oh, I guess, you know, it's certainly a valid observation or point to make. I mean, yes, when you look at last year, 853,900 going up to 1.1 and then dropping back. But I think when you look at the fact that it did go up from the working budget to the forecast, it shows that if expenditures do have to be made to provide those locum services, that they will be made.
Ole Hammarlund.
Yeah, no, and I agree locums are an essential component of the delivery of healthcare. As a minister, you know, you do have unforeseen illnesses that come up. People may be returning. You do have maternity leaves. There's a number of those things that would require locums to come in. But I'm just saying, in general terms, you can't be relying on them. It's not where you need to be. And I think as we move forward, you know, seeing that number, I would like to see it been going the other way. It doesn't seem like it's going to. Another one that stands out here a bit is the Fee Code Advisory Committee. I've seen you're doubling that budget. Once again, he asked, knowing a little bit, but the Fee Code Advisory Committee, what would be their role and why would be the reason that that budget would be double?
The fee code advisory budget, it is a negotiated line item within the master agreement.
Ole Hammarlund.
And so that was part of the negotiations that you had agreed to, or that was agreed to at the time, okay. And I guess another one is a visiting special travel and lodging reimbursement. Once again, that budget was down significantly at 110,000, but you're going back up to 200,000. What's the rationale behind that? Is there something specific that you saved last time, or something specific that you're going back to?
So when you look at the visiting specialist, when you consider the environment we were in last year with COVID, there wasn't a lot of travel and that sort of thing. So we would think that it would be a temporary reduction in that forecast value, so therefore maintain the budget at its historical levels.
Would this be something that you know, what we were dealing with Dr. Midgley, where he's coming over here to do some consultations and things of that nature, and you're confident that that will be coming back, I guess is what I'm saying. Or at least it'd be that you're at least budgeting for it then. Okay. Okay, I guess that covers me for that section.
Time Valley Sherbrooke.
Thanks, Chair. So, contract long-term care services here. It looks like it was it was underspent, but then you've got a significant increase in the budget for the coming year of $400,000. So, can you explain why that is? Under in-province physician services.
Okay, the next section. Okay.
Did you want to respond to that now, or do you want to wait till the next section?
Well, it's medical affairs in-province physician services. Would that not be this section?
It's the next section, but I can look at that and respond.
Sure.
Just one moment, please. That again was part of the master agreement increases.
Okay, Time Valley Sherbrooke.
So, okay, so why was it was underspent this year, and the $400,000 represents the increase, I guess, as you're saying, but why was it underspent then, the previous year, like this year?
So when we look at the contract for long-term care for our house physicians, we can have physicians provided payment in fee-for-service as well as contract. So the difference primarily would be under the fee-for-service section. So it's not a reduction, it's just, it could be a change from an individual physician being paid contract versus fee-for-service.
I don't remember, do you have any more on that particular thread? Because I'd like
No.
to stay within the section, but.
I don't have any more. I do have other questions, not
Sure,
on that
go
thread.
ahead. Time out, Sherbrooke.
So, thank you, Chair. Speaking about, I'm not sure if this fits in this section or not, this is something else. The difference between fee-for-service and salaried physicians. So, it's my understanding that the health PEI covers the insurance costs for salaried physicians, but not fee-for-service. Is that correct? And is that in this section? If not, I'll ask at a different time.
Okay. So in the section we're in, you could see a grant for Canadian Medical Protective Insurance, whereby the budget is in the table document 675 and a forecast of 889.
Okay.
And so the CMPA program is the rebate program to help offset the cost of CMPA membership dues and professional malpractice liability insurance.
Time Valley Sherbrooke.
And that's just for salaried physicians, right? Not, or it's
No,
for both?
that's a grant provided to the Medical Society whereby physicians apply for support.
Time Valley Sherbrooke.
Different topic. A number of Islanders rely on health services that have been provided in the past by Clinic 554 in New Brunswick. And of course, the future of this clinic is, out of our control, but I'm wondering if government is taking any initiatives to provide the same services within this province.
Yes, there is some work being done, a little bit of work to identify what those needs are. I believe there was initially some work done within primary care in this past year, which is in another section. And there is a nominal budget within this section as well.
Time Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay, is the minister have anything else to add on that? I believe that there's other work going on, is my understanding. That's what I'm hearing, some things that sound quite promising. I'm just wondering if you have any other information to share on that.
Nothing additional.
Time Valley Sherbrooke.
So can you tell me where the funding is going then, that's allocated for services that would have been provided at Clinic 554 that you spoke of?
I want to make sure I'm not getting my clinics mixed up.
So this would be the clinic in New Brunswick that provided services such as transgender support services, as well as other services.
Okay. I'm just going to flip to another section and take a look at a note.
Okay.
Can we stick to?
Is this not in this section? Okay, Honourable Member, do you have questions pertaining to this particular section?
Okay, I mean, I
We'll
thought
save
it was
those
this
questions
section
until we get-
because
Yeah.
it is, it has been off-island care, but I guess if it is a different section, maybe I can just get a heads up of which section.
Right now, we're on general administration, the bottom of page 101.
I meant, sorry, which section this would fall under then, so I can ask about it later.
Okay. Which
that
section would this fall under?
I believe it's under primary care.
So, Honourable Member, did you hear it's under primary care?
Okay.
Okay. Do you have any other questions on this section?
No, that's all for now, thank you.
Okay, shall the section carry? Carry. In-province physician services, appropriations provided for payment of in-province physician services, including family practice, emergency physicians and specialists. Professional services, $88,424,800. Salaries, $39,891,200. Travel and training, $646,000. Total in-province physician services, $128,962,100. Shall the section carry? Ole Inverness.
Just when you look at your professional and contract services section on fee-for-service doctors, both contract and regular pay, you had a significant increase in that this current year, and you're kind of, once again, falling in between again for next year. What was the reason for that increase? I mean, the pandemic would assumably mean that they would have had less patients.
Okay. So physicians can be paid based on a salary model, fee-for-service, or contract. So we have to normally look at those combined to identify truly what a forecasted variance may be. So overall, when we look at the forecast, we saw approximately a $1.4 million variance, and the budget, it's just because it's fee-for-service versus the salary, so we have to look at them as a whole.
O'Leary Inverness?
Maybe the minister, so are you seeing a trend, and I was seeing it back when I was minister, that more physicians are switching to salary levels than fee-for-service?
Certainly.
O'Leary Inverness?
Do you have any thoughts on whether that you need to try to find that balance? Like back in my time, it was about 50-50. And I think probably the time it ended, they were probably more like 60-40, and I think now it's more like 70-30 that are salaried. Are you concerned about that, or is that any concern? Maybe there's no concern about it.
I guess my comment on that, member, would be, I think as we recruit that we have to recognize and that we have to be open to what type of a funding model that the individual physician, when they are looking at locating or setting up practice here in PEI, I don't think that we ever want to be in a position that we say, no, your goal is to set up fee-for-service, so we're not going to take you, or the flip of that you absolutely want a salaried position. We have to be very open in our recruitment along that line.
O'Leary Inverness?
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I've heard many people in the public sort of throw different comments out there. And you do, once again, I think you have to also be cognizant of what the other jurisdictions, and they all offer the two options.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I would also say that as minister, you do have some leverage in having situations where maybe there are some salaried doctors that aren't holding the panel size that they might need to be, or like some of the others. I mean, there sometimes can be various reasons for that, don't get me wrong. I mean, some physicians, it might be an age thing, it might be maternity issues or things of that nature, but are you finding that there are many salaried doctors that are having, I think the number is they have to have at least 1,500 of a panel size that would be at that below that number?
Mm-hmm. I really wouldn't have the statistics on that. I do know, though, that, when you have a family physician who is coming out of a residency program, that they're taking over a practice, and certainly we've seen it, you've seen it, member, previously, that doctors that had been fee-for-service, the number of patients that they had, it was astronomical, really. And I think that we have to be very cognizant that when we do have a new physician, a younger physician that is locating to the province, we certainly, first of all, we want to create a work environment that they are going to stay. And I think that even from the patient's perspective, that a new physician starting in a certain area, do you want to start them at such a high patient load that, first of all, they're going to get burned out, and secondly, that they're not going to have the opportunity to really get to know the patient's needs on an individual basis. So that's a personal observation that I have.
O'Leary Inverness?
Yeah, no, and I get into that a bit in the Crapo situation. There was a new physician come over, took over an existing practice, and got overwhelmed by too many patients all at once. So I would argue. But one of the things that I would say that under the fee-for-service model, I mean, physicians can take on larger panel size, but also they can take on nurse practitioners within their own practice, right? And there are some physicians that do that currently. And is there anything that we could look at that may be able to encourage more fee-for-service physicians to take on bigger practices, but yet provide them some supports through a nurse practitioner, or share a nurse practitioner with a salaried nurse practitioner position with us?
I think that's an excellent point, but I think that we have to get beyond just that a fee-for-service physician taking on a nurse practitioner as part of their practice. There's no reason, and we do see it. We have it in place now, for example, in O'Leary, member, where you do have salaried salaried physicians, but as part of that team, you also have nurse practitioners working as part of the team. So I think that we have to always be looking at how we can not only recruit, what type of a structure is best for the recruitment of healthcare professionals, whether it's physicians or nurse practitioners, but also certainly to look at the areas where we can improve. And I think, O'Leary actually is a good example of that, of the dynamics and the great working relationship that there is there.
O'Leary Inverness.
No, and where I'm coming from is that you're right that if I take the O'Leary Health Centre as an example, that you have mostly salaried, I think they're all salaried physicians there, and they have nurse practitioners that are salaried through our department. What I'm trying to get at is that if there's a conversation that needs to be had with the medical society or the fee-for-service physicians to somehow work out a situation where they would take on, or encourage them to take on a nurse practitioner, to take on a bigger panel size. Because what you're seeing, and I've seen it when I was minister, when the new physicians come in, they're taking on half the panel sizes of the previous, and that's why you're seeing your patient registry numbers start to spike up, right? And so you have to be able to try to address that issue somehow, and I'm just wondering if that's something, because like I say, and if you're seeing the trend line going to more and more salaried physicians from even my time, I think as a ministry you have to try to look at why
and it's probably
addressed.
going to continue, to be honest. But no, it's a good suggestion, and I do appreciate that.
O'Leary Inverness.
Because your other part of this, you still only have under the model we have, there's a concept of billing numbers, right? And say West Prince, which I'm more familiar, I think you have a total of 10 so-called billing numbers. They can choose whether they want to be a salaried physician or a fee-for-service within those. But you're going to run out of billing numbers for the amount of physicians that you're able to have based on the workload that they can sustain. So you've got a problem coming and probably getting worse.
I think, we will see that maybe to a greater extent when we get into another section as far as some of the initiatives that are being put in place.
Okay, I guess that's fine.
Okay, Charlottetown West Royalty.
Yeah, and under the retention pay for physicians, hospital care retention incentive for internal medicine physicians. Could you tell me a little bit more about that program? And the rural hospital incentive for family physicians as well?
It's an incentive for the internal medicine physician. I'm just trying to put my fingers on it.
It's suitable if we bring that information back, member.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Well, I just have to know what the program is, because it's, I wouldn't mind taking your time to hear it now, because, I mean, the forecast was 600,070, and now it's 610 for next year. I want to know if is that a reflection of the internal medicine physicians? Is there not as many of them? Is that why
No, the forecast would actually reflect that there's more internal medicine physicians than that budget, so it would be up to us to take a review of that to identify, do we have the budget allocated appropriately for that incentive for the internal medicine physicians?
Charlottetown West Royalty.
So if a internal medicine professional leaves halfway through, how are they paid out that funding? Is it annually? Is it how they paid out? It's a bonus, I would take it. It's a bonus for them.
I understand that it's a prorated value, but I can look into that detail and bring that back.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Okay, yeah, and it's we talk a lot about retention, so I'm just trying to figure out if that program's working efficiently, or where our numbers are, or if this is maybe on the potential exit survey, we could ask that question. But anyway, so the rural hospital incentive for family physicians, that's similar as well. Is that which hospitals would that be referring to?
Those would be for the rural hospitals.
Cheryl, I'm sorry. Did you have more to say? Sorry.
The hospitals excluding Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Prince County.
Okay, those
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Okay. No, and it's a similar situation. So thanks a lot, Chair. I'm good.
Shall section carry?
Question.
Question. Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. So, return for service grants for physiotherapists. It looks like it's budgeted at $1,000. So, how many physiotherapists will we get for $1,000? Doesn't seem like much.
Into acute, that's in acute care?
So it's not in this.
That's not this section?
It's not in this section.
I don't remember, it's not in this section, it's in acute care, and the hour has been called.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report progress and beg leave to sit again.
Shall it carry? As Chair of the Committee, the whole House having under consideration the grant of supply to Her Majesty, I beg leave to report that the committee has made some progress and begs leave to sit again. I move the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall carry. The Honourable Member from Morel-Donagh, the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member from Charlottetown Winslow, that this House adjourn until Thursday, May 6th at 1 o'clock in the PM.
Shall carry.